Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings, and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're your gruesome twosome, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And here we are for episode 90, Levi. Episode 90.
But sort of episode 100, based on what you were telling me.
Yeah, so we've actually have some bonus episodes, of course, we've scattered throughout our run. So this is kind of sort of unofficially episode 100, even though we'll likely be passing episode 100, if not this year, next year. Probably this year, but...
Yeah, more than likely.
Probably. And we're not... I mean, just so you know, the countdown has begun. We're not entirely sure what episode 100 is going to be. We know the next few, but we do want to make it something special, something that means a lot to us. So there's a few things we've been talking about, but
it means a lot to us, not necessarily to you.
Yeah, maybe not you. I don't know.
And if it doesn't, we don't care. So,
but
not to be hateful, but
again, I feel like we're going to be saying this here and there, and we have already, but we've already done. This is our 90th official episode.
We've been
of this
doing
podcast.
this 3 years, about a month ago.
Yeah.
And so that feels about right. I mean, it's felt normal. I mean, when we first started out, we were doing like an episode every week, and that was just like crazy.
Yeah.
The amount that we were doing with that, and that was when we were doing commentaries.
And we've still done some of those here. And there.
and
might have some playing on the horizon
right,
too.
and even a big project coming up eventually, which is, without saying much, going to be explicitly that in its own way. That'll be a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it's been about that long, but it is crazy to look back and think how much we've covered, and how many movies we've seen and not seen, but that's only, making barely a dent in that. Now, of course, 2 movies are covered now per episode, but which is different from what it originally was, but,
So, episode 90, we're looking at Hollywood Shuffle and Amazon Women on the Moon, both from 1987. I think there is there's obviously some shared connections between these movies in terms of Amazon Women on the Moon is more explicitly an anthology film. Hollywood Shuffle's kind of sort of one, but there is more of a narrative through line in it. But again, this might be even jumping ahead a little bit, but just to briefly talk about the pairing of these movies, there does feel something oddly very mid to late 80s about looking at the influence of television on people's daily lives. I mean, obviously by this point it was being made by directors who were more raised by television than any other time in the medium's history by that
point.
And
then recognizing the glut of television entertainment. As it started out in the 50s, it was a lot of like, very basic things. There wasn't a whole lot on TV. There were only like 3 channels. It
was like, and variety shows,
some comedies, and
then also news, showing old movies.
And then by now, though, you're starting to have multiple channels, and cable is kind of becoming a thing. Or it already had been, sort of, but in a big way. And so I feel like these both represent just the glut of programming that existed even by then on television. Now it's so big that it basically isn't even remarkable.
Yes.
But I felt like this was a good time to catch that either then or in the 90s about how much TV there was.
That and how you could kind of get lost in little worlds and be siphoned off into whole other realities from what other people are taking in. Right. And obviously Hollywood Shuffle's taking a much more socio-political statement inherently with that. I feel like Amazon Went on the
Yeah.
Moon, for as good as it is ultimately just about having fun,
Right.
You know, in another way.
And to speak briefly on this, kind of our shared favorite section in Inherent Vice, the novel, is when they go to this. They're coming back from Vegas and they go to this motel that is like has all these TV channels basically, and this is in like 1970, so it's a little ways. It's a ways back from this, but further on from the 50s, and talking about how much TV that you could watch, and there's just everything is on it, and even stuff that doesn't exist, obviously, that's made up, like Godzilla Guns Island, and
Speaking of Pinchon, that actually reminds me of another thing that because I'd recently rewatched Inherent Vice with my fiance who had never seen it before, and she mostly liked it.
I would be interested to see that from somebody who hasn't read the book or has any idea.
Yeah, because I was trying to talk about a lot of things
Right.
about Pinchon, who she's interested in reading more of, but has not really. But it reminded me of a story I remember Michael Chabon, another great novelist, I saw written somewhere.
Oh, I know. I remember this. Yeah.
That he actually finally had the chance to meet Pinchon, and he was so excited because Gravity's Rainbow is like one of his very favorite books, and he loves his other books too.
Right.
And so he was like, oh, what am I going to talk to him about? What am I going to ask him about? And they met for dinner at some undisclosed location. And that he tried to ask him about his books, and he said he very politely always found ways to change the subjects. And that they ended up talking a lot about made-for-TV movies that aired in the 70s and 80s.
Well, that was such a big part of, you had seen that, and I know we're just talking about Pinchon now, but why not? You know?
It's our show.
I know that's a big part of Vinland in particular. There's a lot of Paul Rubens in the it wasn't Louis Pasteur, but it was some famous.
No, there's the one about the Lakers and
it was somebody played Larry
Celtics
Bird.
Right. I think it's Sean Penn maybe.
And it was in the Larry Bird story or something. It's always the something story. So he's obviously that's clear in that, and there were versions of that also in Inherent Vice as well. But anyway, that's just to say that it's funny to me that Pinchon was smart enough to recognize that TV was starting to get out of hand even by the 70s, and that this would be even more so by the 80s.
Then there's all that, it's only for a few pages, but there's that extended Star Trek parody of sorts in Vinland, which there's a lot of Star Trek references that actually pepper his books. There's some Inherent Vice. Yeah. There's, I don't remember exactly what it says, but there's that one moment in Mason and Dixon where one of the characters basically says "live long and prosper," but in an 18th century garb,
and they
and then it describes what the Vulcan salute is in the book, which is just
one of my favorite things in that novel. And I was just actually thinking about Mason and Dixon just now that you were saying that, which is maybe not exactly my favorite book from him, but I think is my favorite idea of what that book is. And that's because we're history teachers, I guess, too, and just kind of what that book's trying to do.
The highs of that book, I think, are higher than any of his other books.
I'd honestly like to reread that book right now.
It's an amazing book. We read that, back in around the early fall of 21?
August of 2020. Because it was during COVID. It was at the end of that summer. I remember we kind of read it together, and you finished it just before I did. But with that book, one of my favorite things is at the very beginning. There's that part with somebody says, I don't remember who it is. They say about smoking tobacco, or something, and they say, "But do not inhale." Oh, right. And it was clearly a Bill Clinton, and then "I am what I am." It said at some point in there, and Reverend Cherry Coke and all that, But that book, but for all its comedy, it's a very serious book about what it is, and actually is about a relationship, which his books are normally not about. I mean,
and it's also deeply spiritual, which is all of his books are spiritual in different kinds of ways, but that's the most explicitly religious of his books, mostly because it's based out of an Enlightenment era, obviously, and that's concerns the characters
about the difference between a Quaker and it's sort of isn't Mason kind of an atheist sort of, or more agnostic, and then I know that Dixon was much more of an actual Quaker, and that book finds a way to be about so many things, about slavery, about Native Americans, about colonial America, about South Africa, about Europe, and the Jacobites, and the leap week or whatever it was. There was that one time they had that whole like week that to like go with the calendar they had to get rid of or something. You remember that?
Yes.
And like and it talked about basically the idea that that week is like it's in another dimension, this lost week or whatever, and that's just all these very interesting things. And of course I really want to read. I'm going to try to make it a priority read Against the Day this year, because that's like a big one that
it's an amazing book. I mean, all of his books are extraordinary in their own ways.
But, anyway.
You mentioned that about Mason Dixon. Since we're just talking about it now, why not? This every time I finish a book on Instagram, you do the same thing.
I'll talk about Running Dog here in a second too, since we're talking about this.
I always and you do the same, like I said, put up an excerpt of the book with a picture of the book. This is Mason, who his wife had kind of died before the beginning of the book, and she acts as a literal and figurative ghost throughout the book.
She randomly serves the purpose of what's John Adams' wife's name?
Abigail Adams.
Abigail Adams in 1776, but as a ghost.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. So this is just if you're not super familiar with Pynchon, this is just an excerpt.
Yeah.
He prays to see her face in the new comet each night, this time in terror of not seeing it. He tries to will it there, yet is amazed that for some minutes now he cannot even remember her face. Yet at last arrives a clear night of seeing, so clear in fact that sometime after midnight, supine in the starlight, rigid with fear, Mason experiences a curious optical readjustment. The stars no longer spread upon the dome surface. He now beholds them in the third dimension as well, the eye creating its own Z-axis along with the star-choked depths near and far rush both inward and away, and soon, quite soon, billowing out of control. He collects that the heavenly dome has been put there as protection, in an agreement among observers to report only what is safe to see. 15 years in the business, and here is his initiation. I mean, he takes these scientific, mathematical principles, which a lot has been written about with Gravity's Rainbow, with his history of knowing about rockets and how that whole book's about rockets in fundamental ways, and translates it into this really densely beautiful idea of a man who has not seen his wife for years, looking up into the stars and hoping to see her. I mean, writers don't get much better than that, honestly. Brilliant writer.
What I loved about that book, too, was it's clear about how much it was about America in a lot of ways, and I'll read this section that I chose, and then we'll move on, but for that
and this will be our art portion of the day.
Yes, because, but this is a quote about sort of America and Britain as an idea. Does Britannia, when she sleeps, dream? Is America her dream, in which all that cannot pass in the metropolitan wakefulness is allowed expression away in the restless slumber of these provinces, and on westward, wherever 'tis not yet mapped, nor written down, nor ever by the majority of mankind seen, serving as a very rubbish tip for subjunctive hopes, for all that may yet be true, earthly paradise, fountain of youth, realms of Prester John, Christ's kingdom, ever behind the sunset, safe till the next territory of the West be seen and recorded, measured and tied in back to the network of points already known, that slowly triangulated its way into the continent, changing all from subjunctive to declarative, reducing possibilities, simplicities that serve the ends of governments, winning away from the realm of the sacred, its borderlands one by one, and assuming them into the bare mortal world that is our home and our despair. But that's what I love most about that book, was its idea of that relationship between England and Britain, and kind of who are the Americans and what
I love too the characters. That's a great excerpt there. That the British characters who are over here kind of describe Americans as these caffeine addicted, revolutionary kind of crazy people.
It talks about the coffee house in these very lofty ways that I had never thought about in American history, which is true. I mean, I learned a lot about that over time of teaching some stuff in Wit and Wisdom, actually, that reminded me for my classes in 7th grade about the coffee house in American history, and that being this is a poor comparison, but like the beer halls in Germany before Nazism, how the coffee houses kind of inspired this revolutionary spirit that led to the American
Well,
Revolution.
again, yeah,
in a
and
lot of ways,
that's
but
just like an earlier version of what goes on in chat rooms now online.
Yeah.
As back then, you actually had to get physically with
Yeah.
people to talk about ideas, usually revolutionary ideas.
and go smoke tobacco, and I mean, it talked about growing pot. That Thomas Jefferson was growing pot and smoking.
This
it
is
and all
Washington,
stuff.
I think, was
Or
it?
also, I think it was kind of both of them. I don't remember exactly because they were both.
And
in
then
it,
Ben
but-
Franklin's in the book a little bit too.
Yeah, he's in it. I think more than the others.
He kind of he's
but-
kind of in the epilogue section. He pops up too, I think, towards the
Yeah.
end of that.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you want to hear us talk about more about Pynchon, go to our 10th episode,
Yeah.
Inherent Vice, which is one I'm still among the proudest of.
I'll talk briefly about Running Dogs since
Oh,
I
yes.
just finished that because I've got to talk.
Another
in some
writer
way
we
about
love,
this.
Don DeLillo.
Yeah, I like this book overall. If you're not aware, I'll briefly explain it. I'm not going to give away the ending, by the way,
Because I so
yeah.
wanted to Levi, but I
Yeah.
didn't. I kept it from him.
Well, it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. Like, it didn't live up to. I thought it wasn't even going to have to do with the thing at all,
Yes,
but it did. But then it was even weirder, like I said, than what it was supposed to be. So the book is all about basically there's supposed to be this film reel, like couple film reels of an orgy that occurred in the under the Berlin Chancellery in the bunker in April of 1945 that assumingly had Hitler in it. This pornographic film or whatever.
No, it would have been in the last
And-
days of
right.
the Nazis, in
And
Germany.
everybody's looking for, and there's always people that are looking for it, basically.
And the
And-
novel was written and set in the 1970s.
Right.
Decades
So it's
later.
like just after Vietnam, kind of about all of these people who were involved in the Vietnam War in some way, all essentially putting their energies into finding this
lusting
thing.
after this
Right.
horrific object. Of
Yeah,
history.
whether it be and it ends up it is quite horrific in another way.
Yeah, it's-
but
yeah.
but it's like involves a senator who's kind of wanting it, and then a guy who works for him who's secretly a double agent for this ultra black ops CIA organization called Pac Ord, which is kind of run by another group called the oh gosh, something Matrix. I can't remember what it's called now, but the is like this very secretive kind of black ops operation. And then there's like people who are fighting against that, but then there's even people who are within that wanting to kill off that main guy who is working for them, who's also working for the senator, and it all gets very confusing. And then the mafia gets involved, and at that point I was just like, I don't know what's going on. Oh, and then also just private collectors who want it of erotica and various things. But ultimately, the book, I think, is a lot about Vietnam in its own way, as far as like that misplaced energy kind of what, and you're kind of reading about that now in a more explicit way with The Sympathizer by
you've read,
Van
yeah.
Nguyen, but which is a very easy to understand book, very straightforward as far as what it's about. But this is a very like kind of essayistic idea of like what is the Vietnam War, why. And it doesn't
and also,
focus on that
also the
explicitly,
creeping remains of
Yeah.
fascism
Right.
in the 1970s and the
Yeah.
legacies of fascism made, almost the cruel joke MacGuffin of this film
yeah,
that people are in search of. And again, the revelation of what actually is the film, almost to me when I was reading the book, which I liked, probably a little more than you, but
Yeah.
that whole era of DeLillo is something that I really like and respect, but he was not quite the writer he would be by the time
Yeah.
you get to like White Noise, I would say. That's a little more refined by the
Yeah.
end of him taking these intellectual ideas and turning them into a narrative, because sometimes it seems as though something like this, while good and well written, is like a really smart, intelligent person telling an extra long joke just to get to this kind of cruel punchline.
Yeah.
It feels like.
and even the very ending itself is a punchline without giving anything away. A character's head's literally cut off to be taken back to their the people that they are working for. And a guy whose name is literally Levi at the end of the book,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, this is so weird that this book is ending with a character named Levi. But knows that guy, and he sees that the body's laying kind of far away, and he's like, I'm going to do a ceremony for him, and blah, blah, blah. And the last sentence of the book is like, and the ceremony begins with a few hairs off the top of the person's head. And it's like almost its own joke of when he gets there, he's going to realize he can't do this. It's just like, what? Why are
Yeah.
you in? Like the whole book is just the biggest question mark of all time. Like, why? Not even in a bad way, but just like, why was this written? What is this? I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
very confusing as far as like a whole conception of. I don't even know
Yeah.
what this is. Like,
Yeah.
but in that way, it was totally fascinating, and it's also kind of a pseudo sequel to Great Jones Street.
Yes.
but which I haven't read.
But in a very, very abstract way.
Yeah, as far as being about the Running Dog is the magazine, like a Rolling Stone magazine, and kind of them doing a story on this senator, but then it kind of turns into, oh, he's into all this erotic art, and we need to get information on that, and then and so it just gets very complicated.
Wait, what year did Run Dog come out again?
Like 78 maybe.
Well, also, I don't know.
know.
You didn't really mention Watergate, but that's this other
Yes,
thing that
yeah.
kind of hangs over the book, along with the Vietnam era as well. Obviously, no, not a literal running dog. As,
78, yeah.
So that's another, the whole specter of Watergate.
And then you look at the original.
Yeah.
But it's like, what?
I don't even know what I'm looking at. I
Yeah.
don't even know if I want to know what I'm looking at.
like just a really big question mark of the whole thing, and I really want to talk about even what that means, the ending of that book explicitly, but I don't even want to, like you, I just am like, nah, let's just leave that up to our own conversations and off the air. But yeah, wow. Like, just like I said, when I found out what it was, I was like, wait, what? And then I was like,
What's funny
well,
is,
that's
like,
not that big of a thing. And then I started really thinking about what that means, and I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like, it's even worse than
No, it's
what
actually
it could have been.
it's
like,
actually very perverse.
Yeah.
And also, and it's
in
disturbing.
a non-sexual way, though.
Yeah, no, it's not a
Right.
sexually related act or anything.
Yeah.
It's disturbing, but then also kind of sad. Actually,
Kind of funny.
Kind of fun. It's everything all rolled up in one.
Yeah, and it's just like, wait, what? Like,
you know what's funny is like when I was like hyping up, oh, you won't believe what it is,
Yeah.
and then I was thinking, I was like, was it what I even remembered? And I had to go back and Google. And I had to like go into some particular specific plot summaries because
It's not
the
on the
movie's
Wikipedia
not
page,
like, or
yeah.
the novel's not like readily summarized places. So I was like, okay, it is what I thought.
Yeah.
I was just
right.
because I was like,
Yeah.
is my memory playing tricks on me? And I was like, no, it is what I thought it was. So, yeah. But anyways,
Anyway, we'll move on.
before we get into our Blue Plate special, two little quick things here. Levi recently went to our nation's capital,
no,
Washington D.C., with his middle schoolers.
Yeah, I got back a couple days ago.
How'd that go?
Literally as good as it could possibly go. I mean, it was one of my favorite trips I've ever taken in its own way. I had a great time. We were worried about the kids behaving, but then, like I have told people about, almost 2 weeks ago now, we had a meeting about the whole trip with everybody, and I saw the kids who were there and their parents, and I kind of was looking across them. I was like, actually, this looks like a pretty good group. And of course, when you take like around 80 kids somewhere, you're gonna have, and their parents on top of that, you're gonna have minor problems here and there.
Yeah.
But overall, it was just pretty much a flawless trip in a lot of ways. The only situation we had with the buses, because they always break down, is our bus's battery went dead one morning, and they had to jump it off. But other than that,
Yeah, again, that sounds pretty ideal if that was all that really happened.
yeah. And so, I mean, I did a lot of the things I did when I first went up there. I saw the National Archives, which I hadn't seen before, so I did that, and that was about it, though. I think everything else I more or less did. The funny thing was, the State of the Union address that was going on Thursday night, and we went to the Capitol that next morning.
Did you see any kind of after effects of that?
No, not really. I mean,
It was
because
just all just
Congress
kinda
was
moved on.
already meeting anyway.
Yeah.
The House was meeting to vote on actually Capitol security. Interesting version of that. But yeah, no, I mean, it felt like it was just it was busy and everybody was there anyway. I mean, I noticed some people walking through certain areas of the Capitol that looked pretty official, but I didn't recognize anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. We were sitting downstairs when they started it started at 9:00, the House session, and they kind of came in and were doing what they needed to do and everything. But it didn't look like it was full to me. There was only a couple people. But yeah, it was just great to be back in that city. I mean, it's a great city, and just to see everything again was really cool. So yeah, not a whole lot to say about that other than that it went well, and that it's done, and I can move on. And
Well, that's great.
it's like I don't have to worry about that anymore. Now I have to worry about school again. So.
Yeah, I've technically been to DC twice. The first time was when I went in 8th grade, and that was a great experience. The second time technically was just when me and some friends were going to go see Interstellar on the 70mm IMAX near in Space Museum, which was an awesome experience, but we were not literally doing anything else in DC. We just purely drove up and down for that, so I don't count that quite
You
as
drove
much.
near there last summer when you were in Falls Church, right?
Yes, yeah. When I took a little trip up to Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, and then as I was coming back down, I don't even remember if I talked about this on the pod or not. Maybe I did.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
did, I
remember.
think.
And then went through Mount Vernon, and so I was in that northern Virginia area a little bit. Richmond traffic was awful,
Yeah.
awful, just crazy.
It was pretty bad when we went through Richmond, yeah.
That says nothing. I'm not saying anything about the city of Richmond. It was
Yeah.
just bad, really bad traffic around there. But
Yeah, the rich men north of Richmond, right? We're
Uh,
gonna move right along from that
Oscar speculation.
to something else stupid.
Yeah, so
I was
Oscars.
confused when you showed this to me what
Tinseltown's
that means.
greatest night, as
Yeah.
they say. Now, again, they're acting as though Overlapping Dialogue didn't do its first annual.
Yeah, it's already over with. I don't know what.
Harry Dean Stanton Awards, because as we know, that's truly what matters in honoring Hollywood's past, present, and future. Now we're recording this on Sunday, March 10th, which the Academy Awards are tonight. We will not be watching or participating
No.
in any form.
I don't even know what the nominees are. I'm dead serious. I haven't even looked. No, don't even show me. I don't want to see it.
Okay. Well, you know some of the nominees.
Yeah. Here, you know what? While we're talking, I'll look at it. I'll look at it real quick.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Uh,
we're-
so obviously, by the time you hear this, it'll all be over already.
And now it's all over.
Any predictions of any sort for you, Levi?
I think Oppenheimer will win a lot of stuff because that seems like that's the big thing. I mean, that's kind of exactly what they would want to win in the sense that it is.
Might have been last year's.
Let's see. Yeah, hang on. It is exactly what they want in the sense of it made money and that it is like a big Oscar movie. Not that it was Oscar bait, but like that it can fit that mold,
Yeah.
Best
Picture
I'll go
nominees.
over these real quick. American Fiction, which we still never saw. No, you know what? I did see this list at some point, and I said at the time that I think I'd only not seen 2 of these, so that was kind of interesting. American Fiction, which I haven't seen, Anatomy of a Fall, which we saw, Barbie, which we saw, Holdovers, we saw, Killers of the Flower Moon, we saw, you saw Maestro, but I didn't. Oppenheimer, we saw, Past Lives, we saw, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. So obviously we've seen all those. Now, as far as all of the
Best Director nominees.
Best Directors, I've seen all that. Pretty much the same thing with actor, except for Bradley Cooper and Jeffrey Wright.
Coleman Domingo's in Rustin also, which was a movie that kind of fell through the cracks.
Oh no, I haven't seen that either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That movie about Bayard Rustin. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a movie. Best Actress, I've seen all of except the Naiad movie, and then Maestro I didn't see. The fact that Annette Bening is nominated for an Oscar and I didn't know about it is
I think
kinda
that's some
like,
Netflix movie.
Yeah,
I
it's
think.
that movie about Diana Naiad, the swimmer. Sterling K. Brown got nominated for American Fiction. I mean, it's May, December. I'm sorry, that's just hilarious.
This original screenplay.
I mean, it's pretty much.
Have you heard about the Holdovers controversy that's going on right now?
No, what?
That there's a screenwriter who says that his screenplay was ripped off from whatever. I think it was the writer of the movie Luca, the Pixar movie. I can't remember his name, but there's currently a whole
You should have
controversy.
seen my
Literally
face.
just
I was like, what? Like,
literally just dropped a day or so ago
yeah.
about maybe plagiarism.
Plagiarism accusation.
You can read it here.
You want to just read it out
Yeah,
loud? Okay. In March 2024, Variety reported that screenwriter Simon Stevenson had lodged a complaint with the Writers Guild of America accusing the film's screenplay of plagiarizing an unproduced script he wrote entitled Frisco.
Yeah.
What? Stevenson said that Payne had been sent his script on at least 2 occasions in 2010s and accused Hemingson's final script of being forensically identical to his, alleging similarities in story, character structure, scenes, and dialogue across the meaningful entirety of the film. What is there any validity to this?
I don't know. I've not formally read the Variety story. There's been people online. Some have said, "Oh my gosh, it's so close." Other ones have said, "No, it's not at all." So I don't even know.
It probably isn't. Then I bet.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it might be similar.
Well,
but
and we love the Holdovers. I mean,
Yeah.
we had a lot of great
Payne
things
we're
to say
fans
about
of,
it.
yeah.
One of the strengths is not necessarily its screenplay. I mean, I think it's got great dialogue in it, and it's got a great structure. But like, one of the ever so slight things I think are like bring it down a notch from being a total outright all around great film is that it is very samey. It's a very you can kind of choreograph the story and where it's going to go. A lot of the greatness is in the direction and in the acting, I feel like. Right. So again, I'm not trying to diminish those accusations, but I mean the story itself is pretty kind of in the best way a version of something you've seen before. Right. But again, it's still a great movie. But anyways,
right.
But that came out. I mean, there's no way that could change anything because it's already been voted on and decided whether it won or not. So I mean, that literally
I don't
will have
expect that to win a whole lot anyway. But
no,
yeah.
But I think screenplay was one thing that people were like, "Oh, it has a chance to win." There's some. I mean, Cillian Murphy.
So. Let's look at
Cillian Murphy is the front runner, but Giamatti, a lot of people say it has an outside shot at winning Best Actor.
I think Anatomy of a Fall could win that too, though. For screenplay,
yeah,
or Past Lives even. I wish Past Lives would win a bunch of stuff because that's
the
not
fact
exactly
that it's even as nominated
movie.
as it is, I think, is a good thing because I think that could have fell through the cracks even more.
Yeah, I mean that's not even necessarily my favorite movie of the year, but it's like the one I've been thinking a lot about, and yeah, because like I mean, nobody cares, I know, and it's not a big deal, I guess, but the fact that Beau is Afraid, everybody just forgot totally about that movie.
Again, overlapping dialogues, Harry Dean Stanton Award winner for Film of the Year.
Yeah, so whatever. I was looking at international film, Io Capitano, I haven't even heard of. That's an Italian movie. Perfect Days, that Wim Wenders film, which we may or may not try to see this week, or at least I know you're going to. I'm going to try to. Society of the Snow, I kind of heard that was good. That's another movie about that Uruguayan plane crash in the Andes where they had to eat each other or whatever. Not to be, negative about that, but they've made a lot of movies about that. And then The Zone of Interest, and then that movie The Teacher's Lounge, which we've seen a trailer for a lot, which is one of the weirdest random trailers. I want to see that movie because I'm like, what is this? Mm-hmm. I wonder what even are the documentaries. Let's see. Bobby Wine, the People's President. Previously titled Bobby Wine, Ghetto President. Ugandan British American documentary. I don't know. Just what? Like, that 20 Days in Maripol, To Kill a Tiger, Four Daughters, Eternal Memory, whatever. Anyway, yeah, all this. Oh, let's look at score, okay. Robbie Robertson will probably win for Killers of the Flower Moon. Or Oppenheimer.
There's a lot of speculation, too, I know, about Best Actress. I know that's mostly, I think, between Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone.
Yeah.
Is what everybody's saying it could be.
I think it should be Emma Stone, but Lily Gladstone's great, too, in that. But
I feel like this is going to be this will probably be a well-rated Oscars.
American Ferrera for Barbie.
There's a lot of people who scratch their heads at that.
I mean, she's good, but, like, okay. Whatever.
All of that comes down to that one big monologue she has. You remember, it's like it's just not easy being a woman. It's like that whole big monologue that's in that movie.
Not easy being a human being.
But I do think this is probably going to be.
To be clear, but
I agree too. But I think this is going to be among the more well-watched Oscars, mostly because of the Barbenheimer-ness of it all. Like those are two big movies from this last year that are nominated.
You know what the shame is, though? I think people have already kind of forgotten about that. And kind of moved on.
I know in some of the ads, they've played on the Barbie aesthetic. I know
Well, that's something I won't be seeing. So
yeah, again, we're not going to be watching it. I'm going to continue my tradition that I've done for a few years now and just actually partake in cinema while it's going on. This year's contender is Ricky Stenicki on Amazon.
Cinema, yeah. Well, from an Oscar winner, Peter Farrelly. So
I'm glad he's going back to his roots of just like R-rated comedy, though. Like
yeah. Well, one of the movies we're doing today actually has a very slight connection to the Farrellys, as we found out yesterday, of the guy at the end of Amazon Women on the Moon ended up producing There's Something About Mary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow. But anyway, so we'll get to that later. But yeah.
So again, we've already given out our awards, so who cares really, even though we just spent minutes talking about it. But yeah.
I'm not going to ever talk about it again. So this Oscars, unless something happens that's a big deal. Which won't.
Yeah, unless like Christopher Nolan just has an expletive-laden tirade.
I'm not saying this to joke too much, but it goes full Michael Richards.
Again, I will say it is overall important for Nolan to at some point be honored because he is one of our most important great modern filmmakers. So him being honored in some way is significant, and I feel like Oppenheimer. Again, the odds that were against this movie, as far as overall, if you're thinking about, are people going to want to show up for a 3-hour R-rated movie in the summer about the creation of the atom bomb? Now we've talked about how Barbie and Barbenheimer is a thing, probably uplifted that movie, but nonetheless, the fact that it made as much money as it did, that it's nominated for as many Oscars as it is, and it's likely going to win some. That is, among Nolan's many, significant accomplishments, that is definitely going to be one of them as well. Yeah. Robert Downey Jr. probably going to be winning this year also. I mean, the career that he's had, he was awesome in that movie too. So
the man who moved the earth.
I don't know if you saw this too, but apparently Cillian Murphy's one of the front runners now to play Bond, I've heard.
A little old, but...
That's what I was thinking too, that isn't he a little old by this point, but I don't know.
He doesn't really look like Bond either. He looks too...
Well, you probably heard all the stories before. He was so close to being Batman in the Nolan Batman movies, and that he really liked him a lot, but Bale was the one who got it, But anyways.
But really imagine if Christopher Nolan goes full Michael Richards or something. And then they have to get Michael Caine to come on and do "Stop Laughing, It's Not Funny."
Hopefully he'll
Letterman.
Hopefully he'll tweet something very enigmatic as he likes to during the ceremony.
Oscars.
Oscar night.
Yeah, or like the little gold man, like, or something.
Yeah.
Or just literally like American Ferrera.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even win, and it's like, okay.
I think we've talked about this on here before, but I promise we're getting ready to move on.
Yeah.
But that moment in Tenet where like there's the one Michael Caine scene, and then like the protagonist, played by John David Washington, he stands up and he like looks around and he's like, "Thank you, Sir Michael." And it's just so like, you literally call him Sir Michael in the movie.
Yeah.
It's so like Michael Caine,
because he's
like moment.
I'm done.
Yeah, it's just, but the movie literally stops. It feels like for a good 5-10 seconds, and it's like, "Thank you, Sir Michael." Like so. Anyways, speaking of movies? Question mark. Let's grab that popcorn bucket, that special limited edition popcorn bucket. It's time for the Blue Plate Special.
Hi, Audrey.
Mama, have a cup of coffee, please.
Sure. I'll have what she's having.
Hey, who wants the large pepperoni? Coming up!
Your spice-infused porridge and popcorn is right here in this siege. Don't forget, the siege is the village in Fremen.
So, again, you're going to have to be my Frank Herbert translator because, and you've read the first two books, Dune and Dune Messiah. We're going to talk, of course, about Dune Part 2. Are you going to be offended if I say Dune 2? I know the formal name of it is Part 2, but I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
We really liked and loved the first one. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, Levi's a fan of the books as well.
In a strange way, because I'm fascinated by the world and all that it is, more than we're actually reading the books, which sounds weird to say, but they're very alright kind of books.
I already know, and this isn't even just purely
Yeah.
against these books, I'm just not a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy on the page in
Yeah.
book form in general. Now, there are some exceptions.
These movies are better anyway.
I just got a feeling I would not enjoy myself. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd be surprised. I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a try sometime. Outside of Stephen King, I find sometimes stuff like this to be, and even Stephen King's versions of this stuff, sometimes I'm a little iffy on. But this is clearly like a very dense world. And what I appreciate as someone who's not read the books about Dune 1 and 2, and the David Lynch movies kind of exist to this whole other thing.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate is I can tell this is coming from dense source material. And it's like, it feels to me, and fans of the book obviously could maybe take issue with this, but it feels like it's taking very dense subject matter and not shying away from it, but making it more accessible in a way that I don't always exactly know what's going on, but I can tell by the beats that director Denis Villeneuve is working within, and then looking back on after I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is that it just feels so refreshing to be dropped into this world that is so dense and so big. Again, there's been, in the ads play this up, oh, this is the next Star Wars, and a lot of comparisons between that. And tonally, they are very different things, obviously.
Yeah.
But what I do appreciate, it is one of the first things like this, like Star Wars, in the sense that it feels like it drops you in this world, and you're kind of having to make sense of it. Obviously, again, the language is denser, and it's about more serious adult themes. But nonetheless, it does give me that exciting feeling of me trying to navigate my way through it. You know what I mean? Again, as somebody who loved part 1, what did you think of part 2?
I'm not going to overdo it as far as talking about this movie, because strangely, it's probably one of my favorite movies I've ever seen that I've kind of immediately started forgetting about, if that makes any sense.
Do you think part of that is just due to your own life busyness, and
yeah,
there's not
that's
a chance
part
to
of it.
luxuriate
Yes,
over it? And you're
yes,
having to
because
move on?
even the idea of going to try and see it with my parents has been a slightly frustrating situation, to the point of just time management and me just kind of shrugging and saying, whatever, I'm not gonna die if I don't see it again, right? But yeah, I mean, it sounds weird to say that, but because this movie was just a total triumph in every way. I mean, it was even better than the first movie, I thought. Did focus on the mythology, but also had way more action, which is something that was a slightly minor negative about that first movie, is that I felt like it just didn't have enough action. Now, if you think that, the book has even less.
Well, I was going to say, it was part of that purely the sections of the plot that part 1 is adapting.
That's mostly that. I mean,
and it's a setup for what this is.
That's a lot more about the grandeur, I think, of the whole world of it.
Yeah.
But this was even more world building. So I think, honestly, if I had to give one suggestion, they should have added more of that in the first movie, and I'm not really sure why they didn't. I don't know what the decision making there was, in the sense of introducing more of the Harkonnens and the entire House Carino late, which is the Emperor and his family. Why they waited to the second movie to do that? That just doesn't really make sense to me, because then all that feels very condensed and pushed into this one movie. So that's like one negative I have. But I think this was just, as like I said, more on a filmmaking level, just so impressive. And I loved looking at all of the stuff on the other planets just as much as on Arrakis. That I thought was great and was very impressive. I thought Austin Butler was good. Once again, he should have been in the first movie already, I think, in its own way. Like I said, to kind of introduce this character, and then I'm not saying they don't do a whole lot with him, but it just feels like there should be more there than there is.
I won't necessarily say rush, but it's like we introduced to him, and then like you
spoiler,
said,
he's dead by the end. I mean, like he is in the book. So that was just something that I was kind of like, that needed to be a first movie thing as well. But and even though this movie was long, it felt like it could have even been longer, and the same could be said for the first movie, and that could be as simple as just adding a little bit more time to that first movie in its own way. but part of that might also be because it was coming out in kind of that post-COVID era, or kind of very ends of COVID, and
there's a
deal
lot
with
of
that.
question marks about the first movie, about if it was
Right.
going to make enough money
and
to
whether they'd even
do the
make
sequel.
this. Now
I think
they're-
so far this has done pretty well.
Yeah, it's
so
actually
far,
made
I
more
think.
money
Yeah.
and is on track to have us another one. Even though I'm like, I don't know about that, but
As a non huge fan, as somebody looking at just what these movies are as they come out, I don't know. Doom Messiah could be a great movie adaptation,
Yeah.
but it feels like we've already pushed the limits as far as, wow, this is so good. It's like if you go to a casino and you bet $100 and you end up winning 1,000 or 2,000, and you're, oh man, I feel like I should go ahead and get out now
Yeah.
before, not that you're going to lose all the money, but just before. I
Yeah.
don't know. I feel like it
I
ends
feel the
on
same
such
way.
an ambiguously
yeah,
thematic note that I feel like that communicates maybe some of the things that it sounds as though Doom Messiah is even about.
yeah, and then that gets into this whole other stuff about the B'nai Teleilax and their abilities to create machines.
I swear, every time you say
And
some of this stuff,
I don't even
literally
know.
sounds like it's made up.
I don't
like,
even know. Well, it is.
I mean,
I don't
yeah,
even know if I'm
like
even
you're just
saying
making
that
it up on the
correctly.
fly.
But no, they create a Gola out of the Duncan, Idaho. Literally, if you're like, what the F is he talking about? Yeah, I mean, but like, and give it to like the resurrected Duncan, Idaho. So that's another thing. I'm like, I don't want to see. I said this in my review of the movie. I don't want to see Jason Momoa have to be like, man, it was really tough to play this role. Like, oh my god, like that's gonna be so annoying when that happens. Like, so there's versions of that. I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm done. Like, I feel like it ended in a randomly ambiguous way that was not as even triumphant as the book was, in the sense of saying, yes, that Paul is going to marry Princess Urlan to kind of become the emperor, blah blah blah, but he's like, oh, but he's still really in love with Chani. This doesn't even say that. It's kind of like, well, what does he feel towards her, and what does she feel towards him? And that's a more interesting way, I think, to end. Even though I love the ending of the first book, I think that's an interesting decision to just go, nah, yeah, you know what, let's just do it this way,
Well, also, like, too, about the question of a Doom Messiah, like, I'm looking at this more about, like, what's the future of Denis Villeneuve's cinema?
It's similar
and I would
with
rather,
like James Cameron. And
and I would rather
Avatar.
him go
Right.
do something else. And he's already mentioned some other projects he'd want to do. And frankly, I was like, I've really enjoyed these two movies. Don't get me wrong, I really liked them. But I'm kind of ready. All right, you did that now.
Yeah.
Go do something
Just
else.
similarly, like I don't really want any Blade Runner movies anymore either. It's like, yeah, we're good. I don't want to do that.
I don't even know what the status of that is at the moment for anything.
Maybe
anymore.
I'm giving too much away because we haven't even talked about this. I would be interested in doing Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 on here as a double feature at some point, because
I still think a lot of Blade Runner
I
2049.
didn't
personally.
at the time, so I want to watch it again to kind of see how I
Yeah.
would feel about it, because I was very out on that movie and was like, I don't get this at all, and and I'm even not as big of a fan as I used to be of the first movie either. So.
He said some things too about that movie recently that he didn't regret making it, but he's not sure if he'd ever approach anyone else's like cinematic world again, because I think the pressure of doing the Ridley Scott's like a continuation of Ridley Scott's visual language as opposed to his
Dune
own.
is so open and
Yeah.
And let me say also, I really love the production design of these movies. But when you go and look at some of the like fan art or even like art for different editions of these novels, you get a sense of imagination that isn't really there in these movies, and it's a lot more streamlined. Even like Dune, the Lynch movie, was closer to that. That movie was just also terrible, but I like the color of that movie. And these movies are actually more colorful than they're not. Because they could be even more kind of monochrome than they are.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's sometimes I'll look at what I've seen illustrations of what Dune looks like in the books, or like just that whole world seems so vibrant and crazy, and this sounds like a weird thing to say, even more Middle Eastern looking in its design, and kind of just, I'm more interested in that vision of the world.
Part of that
but,
is a general thing that happens though, of like concept art of movies, and oh man, why didn't they make that into the movie?
Yeah.
And then
Right.
naturally things are different when they're 24 frames a second as opposed to one single frame.
No, and that's part of that.
because you
I mean,
see certain like just take a random example, like some of the concept art for like the Lord of the Rings movies or the Star Wars prequels, and again, I think those movies on the whole are fine to good, certainly great in the Lord of the Rings department. But like, there's certain things that like the way the Balrog looks in this concept art. Oh my God, that looks so. And then like the movie,
I love the way the Balrog looks in the movie,
and it looks great too in the movie. But like, there's just certain things that look really. I mean, all the like concept art that exists for like the Jodorowsky movie that never happened
is like
is
what?
Just so imaginative, and I think.
For
you
Dune,
know, that when you adapt it into an actual movie, sometimes that's, or like even like Ralph McQuarrie's like Star Wars art.
Yeah, some
like
of that
going
stuff
all the way
is
back,
so
like,
good. I mean, it look, and honestly, there were parts of this movie of Dune Part 2 that look like some of that stuff to me.
Yeah.
Like specifically, one of my favorite pieces of concept art ever is like wheat farming.
Yeah.
And Ralph McQuarrie drew like this. You probably know what I'm talking about, but this like them farming wheat, and there's like stormtroopers there.
Yeah.
And there's parts of that of them farming the spice with these big machines that look similar to that as far as, you know, just a different location and climate and everything. But so I'm sure that was even inspired by aspects of Star Wars, and, you know, and obviously Star Wars took so much from Dune, just especially Tatooine as a whole thing is Arrakis, clearly. And
or even like the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi is almost very clearly
the
sandworms.
Sandworms, and so
I'm not saying you're not wrong. You're wrong. I'm just saying that's a concept art thing that
I think
in
what
general.
would be great. This is random, but make an animated series and just do it that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, thank God Ralph Bakshi never did it. By the way, like, oh my Lord.
I've seen more Ralph Bakshi stuff now when I'm older that I actually think's great. But like those Lord of the Rings movies, I'm not a fan of. But he's done other things. I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty great.
Yeah.
So
it's more independent stuff.
Right.
Too. But I'm just saying, like taking somebody else's stuff and doing that, I don't know. But anyway, that's just to say that, like I think, but to say that, I think these movies actually are very successful in that realm of design, even when they don't do those things too. So overall, that's not exactly a negative.
This movie strikes a very fascinating, and the first one did too. Like, but I think especially this one strikes a very fascinating balance between like, just like this is the kind of space opera, swashbuckling adventure, sci-fi filmmaking that we all really want, but aren't getting serviced, and it feels very old-fashioned. But then the moral complexity on top of all that is far greater than anything you saw in the Star Wars movies, even in the prequels, or like Lord of the Rings, or these other sci-fi fantasy epics. And that's what's so weird about these movies in a good way, is that they feel both once very old-fashioned, but also very modern and very cutting edge in the sense of you're like, who am I supposed to root for here again? Because obviously, in a good way, because it's like, it's very muddled and mucky.
And the idea of, what, and this is very clear, and this was what it was all about in the beginning, about the Middle East in the 50s and 60s, and that even more so after Dune was written in the, the 2000s, but of that idea of we want to help these people, but actually we kind of just want their stuff.
Yeah.
And even Paul becoming a version of that in his own way of like, but we're going to rule it this way, and this is how y'all need to really, this is what needs to happen.
And the question of the fulfillment of prophecy versus simply using other people's prophecy to make your own, reestablish your own sense of royalty or self-importance.
And the question in those books I think is interesting in the story in general is the idea of, well, wait, is this like actually prophecy, or is it him making that is an interesting question of like, I think it actually
all the memes with Stilgar, by the way, that's been happening ever since
where
this
it's
movie
like
come
he
out.
literally coughs and he's like, it is written, everybody, and it's pretty much that in the book too, but now
you doing that just makes me think of like, we should have had like 80s Macho Man be the
Muad'Dib, Kwisatz Haderach, going off, baby, like
take it and go,
take the water of life and go, and
then just had George the Animal Steel be Baron Harkonnen.
I think was the funniest thing. Two things. The funniest thing in the first movie was, and I think we talked about this, that moment where he's fighting Jamis at the end of the movie, and he's like, what is he doing? He says to Rebecca, Stilgar does, and he's like, he's never done this before. And there's that moment where like Stilgar looks, and the music's like boom, like that, where he's like, oh my god, like, But anyway, that one of my favorite things of me and you watching this movie was I turned to you at one point and explained the idea that, first of all, that Rebecca was the daughter of Baron Harkonnen, which was kind of, I feel like you'd already knew that at some point.
Yeah.
But then I was like, yeah, but you know what's interesting is that they were supposed to, is that Rebecca was really supposed to have a daughter so that she could marry Feyd-Rautha. So technically, Paul and Feyd-Rautha are supposed to be like married under like what that was going to be. And you just kind of looked at me like, what? Like, but I was like, oh yeah, they're not even going to explain that part. But that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like to, because you know the rule of Canley.
Right.
Yeah.
I live by it every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is basically just this idea of like, which is so strange. Of Canley in that world is this official, basically, a treaty that says that these two houses have a vendetta against each other, and there's these certain rules that you have to go by under that, and that eventually you're supposed to like kind of have this. And there's even bigger Dune nerds than me that are like, no, that's not what it is. I'm sure that I'm screwing it up. But from what I remember, it's that there's supposed to be an eventual truce through marriage or something. And so, yeah, but that's a whole thing with that. That's not even explained in the movies, which is fine because it doesn't really matter. But, yeah, like you said, I think these movies do a good job of streamlining everything relatively. I felt this movie could have used a little more of pushing the things that are in this movie back over to the first movie, which felt very like a great first half, but then it's like, okay, now we got to get everything in at the end. It's like, yeah, you needed to add more stuff. Not even in these big ways either.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so.
But as a Dune fan, you feel satisfied with
Yeah,
these
I
movies?
mean, and I became a Dune fan off of these movies in their own way. Like, I read the first book saying, okay, I'm going to watch these movies, and so
you had seen the Lynch movie, I guess.
Oh yeah, and that made no
right,
sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that did not make me a Dune fan in any way. I was very much like, yeah, I don't know what this is, and use these movies as an excuse to read that book. And I'm going to continue reading the books, but I wanted to take a break from that for a while. But yeah, I said, but at the same time, and it's partly because I had to go on this field trip, and I've just had a lot going on that I've already kind of forgotten about it in its own way, and which I think is
That's
fine.
natural. Yeah.
But,
As the father of Timothée Chalamet, is a huge fan of Timothée Chalamet. Does this do anything for him for you as far as his stardom? As far as him being, he's the star that these movies are sold on. Do you think his stock has gone up as a Hollywood star?
Yeah,
young star
I
because
think
of these
so.
movies?
I mean, the role naturally encourages that in the sense of starting out being very young and seeming very young, and then like, oh, now he's, this, almost, mysterious figure,
Yeah.
I think that's a good role for him to do, and just as a box office draw, it's clear that worked for him.
And again, we probably talked about this back when we talked about him with Wonka, but I imagine he's got all the choices laid before him as a young star that you have as far as being in these more superhero movies or Marvel movies or Star Wars or whatever, and he's been so far very savvy about the things he picks to be in. So
yeah,
I think that overall is a good thing for him.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Dune Part 2?
Nope.
See it.
Yep.
Check it out on a big screen while it's still there.
Yeah. It'll be streaming before long, probably too, on HBO Max, which is probably where I'll have to watch it again. But
yeah,
because I don't know that I'll get to see it again. I don't know.
Well, it'll be out on home video.
No, I mean like in the theaters. What I'm talking about.
Right.
But yeah.
All right. So now we're gonna get into our movies for the day. Here is the trailer for 1987's Hollywood Shuffle.
Hi, my name is Robert Townsend, and it's hard to make a movie in Hollywood, but I did, with the help of a few friends and a few credit cards. What's the line?
I ain't be got no weapons. I ain't be got no weapons.
My film's about making it as an actor in Hollywood.
The only role they gonna let us do is a slave, a butler, or some street hood or something. Don't sell out, brother. Oh, promised land. Melon soda?
But the real trick is finding a juicy roll when the odds are against you.
Good luck, brother.
What we're looking for is an Eddie Murphy type.
What is happening with your cool vines?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're the worst actor I've ever seen in my life.
Then they said I wasn't black enough for the part.
Ricky, can you tell us what you've been doing since you've graduated?
Well, Robert, I've played 9 crooks, 4 gang leaders, 2 dope dealers. I played a rapist twice.
Whoa.
That was fun.
They'll never play the Rambos until they stop playing the Sambos.
I just want to be me. I don't want to be Eddie Murphy.
He's the one we want.
I just want
Hollywood Shuffle.
Now that was a good movie. I love this movie. It was genius.
Go see it today, please. Because I got to pay off these credit cards. Tell your friends about it. Lots of friends. Your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, maybe your ex-wife. Take a bum to the movies. Go see Hollywood Shuffle today, please.
What I think is funny about this trailer, but also we're going to see it later with Amazon Went on the Moon, is how much they're making fun of the conventions of trailers. I mean, it's very in your face and very kind of meta. And what's funny is, too, is the desperation of he's like, please go see this movie because, you know, I've got to pay off the credit cards and, you know, it's, you know, that seems as though there's a lot riding on this movie. And it seems like there really was for Robert Townsend, specifically as a talent.
Yeah.
So Hollywood
Betty
is a 1987 American satirical comedy film about the racial stereotypes of African Americans in film and television. The film tracks the attempts of Bobby Taylor, to become a successful actor and the mental and external roadblocks he encounters through a series of interspersed vignettes and fantasies. Produced, directed, and co-written by Robert Townsend, the film is a semi-autobiographical reflecting Townsend's experience as a black actor when he was told he was, quote, not black enough, end quote, for certain roles. Mm-hmm. So he's obviously the biggest kind of name in this, but there was this repertory group.
Yeah.
There's a Criterion, which is how we watched this movie, little special feature that talks about it, a little group called the Hollywood Shuffle Players. Mm-hmm. They were kind of this troupe that they did some theater, they did some stage shows, they kind of popped up in and out of various
many of them
movies.
Black, but also some white actors too.
Yeah, principally black. And then Townsend, he's kind of brought them into the fold with this. Then there's the Wayans brothers, who were kind of also involved with this.
One of them co-wrote the movie.
Yeah, it was co-written. It was Keenen Ivory Wayans, Robert Townsend, and uncredited also by Dom Herrera.
That comedian that's in the movie. White guy, yeah.
I only saw this for the first time earlier this year, and immediately thought it was hilarious, and immediately thought of pairing it with the other movie we're going to be talking about later. Levi, somebody who had not seen it, how did you kind of initially react to this movie?
Well, I kind of had an idea of what it was going to be about, and I had first heard about this movie of Quentin Tarantino talking about it on a podcast somewhere at some point, and you know, the Robert Townsend type, I guess as I would call it, is very specific because he gets compared a lot and compares himself in this movie to Eddie Murphy,
who was the defining black star.
And he
of
also
the 80s.
Actually directed Eddie Murphy Raw. I think
the
stand-up special. But what I like about him even more than Eddie Murphy is that you get a sense that it's weird because I've never gotten the wholesomeness from Eddie Murphy. Like, it's very...
well, especially not during this time.
Right, very vulgar and angry and satirical. And Townsend's kind of that in his own way, but is very much like a more positive version of that, but also is willing to be kind of vulgar. So it's kind of this wholesomeness that goes up against this, like, vulgarity, you know.
To that point, one of the biggest surprises for me when I first saw this was the heart behind it. I was not necessarily expecting this movie to exactly have a heart. I was expecting more of just a laugh-a-minute comedy.
Right.
And it is very, very funny, I think.
Betty.
Yeah. We'll talk about... There's a bat in my house.
A Detroit bat in my house, yeah.
Which is like a show within this movie.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
But again, like, skipping ahead to the end a little bit, because his whole character is this... struggling actor who works at Winky Dinky Dog, which is a hot dog stand.
Winky Dinky Dog.
Which they have these really dumb
Which I was
like,
thinking about this
hot dogs
week.
Sticking out of.
I was thinking about this week because when I went up to D.C. at the Pentagon City Mall, there's a Kong Dog is the name of a hot dog place, and I was thinking of Winky Dinky Dog the whole time while I was there. But yeah.
But so he's a struggling actor, and he wants to be just taken seriously like any actor. He doesn't really want to be defined by his race or by his outside. He wants to be defined what he can bring out of his insides into a performance. But obviously, as a black actor in Hollywood, and it's true now, but it was even worse, obviously, in the 80s, he's only getting these like hood street parts that are stereotyped to black actors. And he's very frustrated, but he finally does get a role as basically this, what is he, like it's like a pimp,
like
who's just
very effeminate pimp, which is like,
and so
a 1970s
and anyways, he's really laying it on heavy, and he's happy that he got the job, and his girlfriend is, and his
but his
grandmother's kind of like like, you know, like, why do you got to be acting like that? Why do you got to be acting so foolish? And again, I wasn't expecting this. It didn't exactly drive me close to tears. But it's very sad at the very end where he's like, his whole family's there and they're all just happy that he got the part.
His little brother.
And his little brother's watching him, and he's like, I'm not about to sell myself out in front of my own brother, in front of my own family, just to prostitute himself. And that was kind of his breaking point where he kind of walks away and decides, you know what? You know, what is it, his dad? Earlier in the movie, there's this one scene he has with his father in the movie, and he's kind of talking about what the role is and what he's going to be doing, and he's like, oh, it's work, and his dad says something along the lines of, well, there's work at the post office, saying like, you can work hard and be a successful person, but you don't have to prostitute yourself while doing it. And then kind of one of the funniest little ways the movie ends is almost a little joke of him doing a PSA for the post office, basically as his, you know, is like I'll just do this instead.
And I was really, and I think me and you specifically, might take a lot from that because and that's a very personal moment I've been thinking about that shocked me that it was the end of the movie, but immediately made sense to me. Like, a lot of people would see that as a negative to say, well, there's always work at the post office, and then the movie ends, and it's like, seems kind of like a slap in the face to people who want to be in show business. But we're people who went originally to do film. You got a degree in it. I was getting to where I was going to do that, and decided, no, we're going to do teaching instead. And like, a lot of people see that as a negative of, oh, you're not getting to live out your dream, or you're not doing this thing. And it's like, no, there is that worth in doing any job, and it's honestly more worthy to do something like that than to sell yourself away for show business, which is like, you know, a truly disgusting business.
And I got a lot of secondhand anxiety watching the scene where there's all those actors packed at the casting agency, and they're all like reading their lines, and they're all like, "Am I going to get the part?" And then it's like a funny little scene, but also disturbing in its own way. Of that one guy's like, "Oh, you're reading one of those parts." There's another black guy sitting there with him. And he's like, "Oh, you're going to read one of those parts? Like, you're going to prostitute yourself and like make yourself look ignorant, man. You can't sell out. You gotta stay true to it." And then immediately it's revealed he's going to go read for one of those very same type of parts, and smiles and laughs and walks away. And again, just that secondhand anxiety of like, you know, how hard it is to be successful in Hollywood as is, and then couple that with just racism that obviously is something that black actors and actresses have to deal with, or any minority actors, and then even women as well, all the parts that they get restricted to. And the idea that people look at you on the outside and define for you what your ceiling for success is. Now, that's universal for anybody in any walk of life. But in Hollywood, is like that times 10 on a daily basis. And like you said, like, we look at that, the ending as kind of a joke, but ultimately a happy ending, because it's like, well, I care about these people in my life, and I'm not going to live a life unworthy of them and of myself by debasing myself. So that's like what the actual kind of narrative emotional through line of the movie itself is, which is a pretty short movie. But then on top of all that, there's all these little kind of vignettes that are peppered throughout, which effectively act as parodies of like 80s Hollywood and TV. How did you find that balance between that, like, kind of the narrative thread versus those moments?
Repeat the question again. I'm sorry.
So it's just like how did you appreciate or value the bouncing back and forth between that main narrative with all these vignettes?
What I liked about that is like what we talked about with the Godard, essayistic kind of films, and the idea of we're going to make this movie be more about these ideas than as a structured story,
because when the movie ended, one of the first names you mentioned was Godard, and at first I was kind of like, oh, that's a random thing to mention, but then immediately it snapped into place and made a lot of sense, and I think that was very perceptive on your part, because we were just talking about that with Contempt and Pierre LeFou, and in many ways this is kind of an essay. It's almost like a really well-written long form New Yorker essay that is very funny and insightful, but it's happened to be a movie instead of just printed words on a page.
Yeah, and so that it just felt like that was more interesting to me than making a straight movie. But also I like that unlike, and I mean there are a lot of similarities between this and Amazon Women on the Moon, but the main difference is it is about something, whereas that movie's not really about anything. And so I mean, it's I like that about it, and that was what was some of my favorite parts in the movie, were those kind of fantasy sequences or kind of asides. But obviously that was such a big part of the story were those asides in their own way, as far as showing the world of this movie and how it's really not that different from our own, but that it's like this Betty version of it.
And so randomly the TV show within this movie actually I think is a interesting point to talk about, because it's actually a bridge between the fake world of the world within the movie and then the fake world that's also alongside, because we see some clips of this show. There's a Bat in My House is the name of it, and all it is like it's this stupid looking white bread family sitcom that there's a bat in the house, but the bat is depicted as a fictional black actor named B.B. Sanders, who plays the stereotypical jive talking African American black character. Detroit, a bat from Detroit who's in this house, and it's that all those scenes are funny, but then there's a moment where the B.B. Sanders actor stops at Winky Dinky Dog, and he's surrounded by this whole entourage, and he shows up
wearing the hat.
He's wearing the hat, and he shows up in a limo, and he's wearing these dark sunglasses.
Yeah.
And they're all treating him like a celebrity, and it's like, we love you, blah, blah, blah. And how fake and disingenuous that character is, that he's in a suit, and he's acting like he's this, big-time actor.
Plays the guy's like, wings don't fail me now.
But he's acting like he takes it all so seriously. And, I'm just going to read a little bit from the Wikipedia plot summary here. Ecstatic to meet a potential role model, Bobby asks Sanders how he determines if a role is worth taking. Sanders says if Bobby's character does not die, then, quote, it's a good script. He tells Bobby that acting is not about art, but about making money through sequels, merchandising, etc. Which, again, there are more and more criticisms of this phenomenon that were starting in the 80s, because obviously, as we know, and we've talked about at length on here already, other things, 80s cinema is a very strange time, because it was coming out of the great Hallican days of the New Hollywood era and all blah, blah, blah. And again, it's true. I'm just saying, we've all heard and talked about this story before. And the 80s were kind of the returns of the studios, kind of making movies that were all about trying to start the next Star Wars or the next Jaws and franchise all these things out. And I love that this movie depicts that that world's still out there for black actors, but they're just getting the little mini scraps of the outsides of the outskirts of that world.
There's a bat in my house.
Yeah, and that again, that character takes himself, the B.B. Sanders character, takes himself so seriously, and he's this great. Even though it says he doesn't care about art, he's acting like he's just this highfalutin individual when he makes a friggin' show called "There's a Bat in My House." And so I think that seems very interesting because it's this bridge between like these vignettes and the world of the movie.
Yeah.
Because all the other vignettes are kind of, they just operate outside of
they're in fantasies
reality.
right. That's actually within the movie. Yeah.
There is also, I think one of the funnier ones is also this film noir parody that's in the movie.
I forgot about that.
Called Death of a Breakdancer, which is like they're watching that in the movie and then it transitions to being that.
Yeah.
And it's shot like a film noir.
Especially Maltese Falcon,
yeah,
the way it looks,
and that but what's interesting is that's like, and I was gonna get into this too, that is the type of thing where like he wishes he was in something a little more like that. Obviously it's still got these jokes in it, and it's like about a Jerry curl that's like one of the Wayans brothers is like,
and he literally doesn't spray it for like 2 minutes and it's already screwed up.
It's just like messing up and he's like freaking out. But like that's this kind of more old school, like legitimate genre type of movie that he's like, I'd love to do something like that.
Right.
Then there's the At the Movies, which is clearly a parody of At the Movies, where it's
there's also a parody of that in
yes,
the Moon,
there
so,
is. But the like fake movies that they watch in that, and just to go through those real quick, Amadeus Meets Salieri, which I forgot there was an Amadeus parody in this. Chicago Jones and the Temple of Doom, very clearly Indiana Jones. Dirty Larry, obviously like Dirty Harry, and then Attack of the Street Pimps, which is like almost like a Romero zombie movie, but it's like these street pimps. What did you think of like that whole segment where they're like talking about all these different types of movies and jumping through it? And the whole conceit is that they're like sneaking into movie theaters and like watching these movies, and then they get caught at the end and get tossed out. But
well, that's probably why that section is probably why Tarantino brings this movie up so much, because we know he loves watching movies with black audiences, as he's talked about all the time, which he sees himself as an honorary black person,
which
anyway,
is one of the most embarrassing, shameful things, honestly,
and is in a lot of ways kind of racist in its own way.
Right.
What works about that is just the sense of taking that highfalutenness, and which I don't. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, but people that view, and I don't even think Townsend exactly thinks this either, but that people view Siskel and Ebert as this like artsy film critics, and that's not at all how cinephilia views them. In fact, it's actually the opposite, very negatively, and I think wrongly.
Well, people at that time, like the Kales or the Canbys, they saw that as like, that's like,
right.
What
that's what I'm saying.
Become.
But like people then, average everyday people, like, those are those critic guys,
that fat guy.
Like, that's what I'm saying. And so it's like they're this middle ground between two groups of people that don't even know how much they're one way or the other.
Yeah, right.
But that. So in that way, I don't know what Townsend actually thinks about that. I would think he probably would be mostly like all right with that.
Yeah.
But that's more of just a comedy of like, let's see if we get actual, instead of these white guys, let's get black people to talk about these movies and the way they talk about them, and it's meant to be a joke. Like obviously it's kind of dumb. Like anyway, about like Attack of the Street Pimps, awesome movie. Yeah. It's like obviously they know that's stupid, but just that. But some of the things they said about, I think some of the most instructive stuff was what they said about the Dirty Larry stuff, and I love Dirty Harry, but that movie is like
it's also the series in general,
right? And just what that is as a whole thing is like a landmine of criticism that could be leveled towards that movie. Even though I still love it, it's like this movie's very complicated, and but we also know what a big fan that Tarantino is of Don Siegel, who apparently is the greatest filmmaker of all time. By the way, he talks about him. It's actually probably whoever directed Switchblade Sisters or Jack Hill or something, who you've met, by the way, Jack Hill. But so we won't talk bad about him. But anyway, I like that section in the sense that it's just really funny anyway, just in general.
Yeah.
But kind of what it had to say about film criticism at the time. But
there's also the Black Acting School segment, which is pretty funny. Basically, it's like this fictional infomercial for like a black acting school.
Yeah.
Like, we'll teach you to play all the black parts. And
Yeah.
it's like, whether it be a slave or whether it be a a pimp or whether it be
a rapist,
and just like all
a servant or whatever.
And one of the most absurd aspects of that is like some of the white instructors telling the black
no, this is what
actors
you do.
how to act.
Yeah.
Is
right.
instructive in its own way. One of the kind of subtly also saddest and most moving parts of the movie, we kind of skipped over it when we were talking about what the ultimate arc is. It's like the day before he goes. It might have been the day before, or it was after. I can't quite remember the order in the movie of when he quits what he was doing. Is of him dreaming of the parts he wish he had, and then we get like what if he was Superman? What if he was Rambo? Obviously, very white parts that white actors in Hollywood are able to get. And he's like, what if, one of the fantasies the movie's asking and that he's asking is, what if we got the same spotlight or parts that white actors enjoy frequently? And then even where he's up for an Oscar, I think it's like his 5th Oscar at that point.
Yeah, and to speak on that briefly, I mean, the fact, and if you think racism in Hollywood is dead, then just think about the fact that it's still even a question of, can we get a black person to play James Bond? Like, the fact that's even still being asked and hasn't just happened is like, and I know there's a lot of people who would say, oh, they're just doing that just to be progressive, and it's like, well, what, is there something wrong with that? Like, Well,
also, why is there any point to make a new James Bond movie other than to actually do something new with it? Anyways.
Which, I mean, they did the whole thing where it was like the new Bond is a black woman, but it's like,
007.
but that wasn't. But then he still takes over as 007. Right. So it's like, like I said, the fact that's even still a question, shows that.
Of course,
and I'm going to just use the word as it is, that racism is still alive in Hollywood. I mean, very clearly. That's even a thing that is still being bandied about and discussed and hasn't just happened. Or even that Dev Patel could possibly be, or like, and that's a whole other thing because it's a British property, but it's all still part of the same,
I would totally agree racism is still alive in Hollywood. I think undeniably one of the better things about 2024 compared to 1987 is that black talents now have far more agency.
Oh, it's
and,
not even close.
Between, what they can create for themselves.
Right, and I'm not even
the success of like Jordan Peele, and
and I'm not even saying in a big way. I'm just saying that it's it's.
But there are, like you said,
different.
Within the mainstream white Hollywood, there is still a ceiling of.
But in a lot of white people's minds, especially, that scene is, we're done with that. We've moved on from that. Like, no, clearly not.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Peele. I wanted to mention Nope in particular with this movie because it reminded me of that also in the sense of the sitcom and kind of the idea of and I talked about this at the time when I wrote about it, the idea of spectacle and what people do to themselves to become the spectacle, and kind of seeing that especially from an Asian American perspective with Steven Yeun and his character as a young boy being in that sitcom, and him as the Asian kid in the sitcom, and kind of that as
even thing. To parallel with that is like David Kaluuya and Keke Palmer's characters.
Or is it David Kaluuya or Daniel Kaluuya? Daniel Kaluuya.
Daniel Kaluuya. I'm sorry. That like they're the descendants of this, one of the originators of cinematic spectacle in the form of that, like that famous horse piece of film.
The Edward Woodward's film, yeah.
Both like in his Asian Americanness and then in their African Americanness of like these true forces behind the whole history of Hollywood and the parts that they play, and that now they're more at the forefront. But
but I was just thinking about that idea of that as far as the sitcoms of that, and how there were so many sitcoms in the 80s and 90s of the animal, or literally the alien in like Alf, and the idea of, there's this chimpanzee, or there's this bat in my house, and like
here's
that
a
standing in, frankly, that standing in, frankly, for minorities in Hollywood of like,
you can maybe do that part over here,
or you can be the freak or the geek or the literally you're the geek
Steve
show.
Urkel in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean,
even on a show that's other black actors.
But
too,
don't you find that? And I feel like that's what Peele was saying with the sitcom in Nope as well. But don't you think that there's something to that idea of like the monkey or the alien or the this thing out of this fish out of water comedy, literally, of representing a minority.
Yeah.
And that, like, being kind of
But
racist.
then if we, and let it act as itself, then it has to be put down due to this perceived danger.
Yeah, and so,
that
it goes out of control, and that you can't trust the thing to do its own thing.
That's very true.
And it's always the white family that's having to deal with that. And I feel like this and that are the most obvious versions of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is even more impressive in the sense it occurred at the time.
Yeah, right.
They were like, literally, there's a bat in my house, and then it's a black man going, "Batty, batty, batty, wings don't fail me now." Like, and that's literally like a representation of how minorities are treated on TV. Like, we've got this, or even like now you have that show, The Neighborhood, which is very popular, but is literally about
black people and black people,
right?
Side by
and
side.
how like Cedric the Entertainer is like moving in with.
I think it's trying to have a well-intentioned message, but there is still this otherness that is inherently tied into that.
Let me look up about that show because I want to say who the actors are exactly. But the
one
fact
guy that was on New Girl, I can't remember his name.
But they're the fact that. Wait a second. Cedric the Entertainer responds to Cat Williams' viral claims is all I'm seeing, and then I'm going to leave it there. But with that show, that it's like Cedric the Entertainer is depicted as he's the stick in the mud. He's the he's just a jerk.
Or he's an old guy too, older guy.
Yeah, and that Max Greenfield, moves the nicest guy in the Midwest, moves his white family into a predominantly African American neighborhood in Los Angeles, where not everyone appreciates his extreme neighborliness. There's just something inherently wrong about that show to me, and I've never thought about it until now. But the idea of this white guy's going to move in this black neighborhood and make everything okay, like, that's pretty bad.
I mean, gentrification, people label that all the time.
And it's seen as the opposite of, what happens when the white guy's the minority? It's like, but it seems like with that show that it's saying, but he's going to fix this. He's going to fix their non-neighborliness.
That's inherently part of the premise.
Right. And that's just racist. And that's just... And so that's still a version of that is still going on TV. And like another version of that seemed a little more heartfelt and actually successful, even though I didn't see it, was that Bob Hart's Abishola show that was like about... this white guy falls in love with this African woman.
Mike and Molly guy.
Right. And that seemed like, that seems like actually kind of a heartfelt, interesting show. And I never watched it. But it's like, I never actually thought about that until now, though, about The Neighborhood, that's like the same version of this sort of thing going on now. And nobody's talking about it because it's a stupid network show that nobody cares about.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I'm sure that show has its like lesson of the week moment or whatever, where it tries to go, but actually...
But batty.
Yeah, but wings don't fail me now. Yeah. So that's all just to say that if you thought this movie, it was clearly, very, abrasive at the time, but in this positive way. Like I said, it's not like Spike Lee, who's like, who we love and we talked about last week, preaching at you about blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is just the reality of what it is. And I'm still going to be positive by even saying, hey, even if it don't work out, then I'm still going to do what I know is impactful, which is work at the post office, which sounds like a negative, but I think what works about the movie so well is it didn't feel that way. And part of that is, like I said, our own experience of that being our lives and its own way of saying, well, I'm going to be a teacher since I can't do movies, And so all that basically saying that the work is still undone in a lot of ways, but like you said, that it's far better, than it was in a clearly positive way. But
also, the movie was made for about $100,000. It made $5.2 million, so it was financially successful. Certainly, we can talk about Townsend maybe a little bit before we move on to Amazon We're on the Moon. He's not been somebody who had a massive career. I remember seeing him on the Parenthood sitcom. It said also that so this is also maybe part of his origin story that we didn't even know, that he auditioned as a part on Saturday Night Live's 1980-1981 cast, but was rejected in favor of Eddie Murphy. So maybe he's like, looking at Eddie Murphy's career and thinking, well, why couldn't I have had that, a version of that. He also made a movie I've always kind of wanted to see. I remember seeing in video stores a lot back in the 90s and early 2000s called The Meteor Man.
Yeah.
Which is basically like a kind of a parody of superhero movies that he wrote, directed, starred in, the whole works. $20 million budget. It only made $8 million, though, so it kind of flopped.
Yeah.
But again, I did think about that ever so briefly when I was thinking about the Superman in this movie in terms of what if one day we get a black Superman or how cool that would be.
And now we've had Black Panther, but it still feels like there should be more than that.
It should be said that we're not as huge fans of the Spider-Verse movies, but there are generations now of younger kids who their Spider-Man is Miles Morales. It's not Peter Parker. So that is...
And I can say, and this is getting too personal about a person that I know, who I'm not going to say who it is, a student of mine, who I can tell is really into those movies, and he's Latino.
Yeah.
And I can tell... And he's like Miles Morales is Superman more than Peter Parker. Sorry, Spider-Man more than Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And I can tell, I don't know, I'm not going to assume for him anything, but it seems like that is in its own way a representation of a minority being Spider-Man means something to him, obviously, than it being the white Spider-Man. So that can affect people of other minorities in other ways too, So that's just one thing to say that clearly there's a version there are versions of that speak to those
audiences,
to people, So
would highly recommend this movie. Again, I think it's an interesting historical time capsule, while also unfortunately still being about a lot of things that are going on today in Hollywood. So Betty. We saw this on the Criterion Collection edition that got put out a few years ago. So check that out. Up next, also from 1987, one of the great titles I think of all time, along with like Kentucky Fried Movie, which is in some ways this is a descendant of Amazon Women on the Moon.
Universal, the studio that brought you such classic motion pictures as All Quiet on the Western Front, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Out of Africa, is proud to present
Amazon Women on the Moon.
Featuring Steve Guttenberg, Rosanna Arquette, Lou Jacobi.
Where am I?
Pretty scary, huh?
Ed Begley Jr., B.B. King.
Did you know that every 7 minutes a black person is born in this country without soul?
Tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree.
Russ Meyer, Ralph Bellamy, Monique Gabrielle.
I bet I know what you want.
Griffin Dunn, Steve Forrest, Sybil Danning.
Oh, Steve, save yourself.
Henry Silva, Steve Allen, Kelly Preston, Carrie Fisher, and Arsenio Hall. Amazon Women on the Moon.
I've seen enough, Doctor.
I know you have, but have you?
Amazon Women on the Moon.
The new film from directors Joe Dante, Carl Gottlieb, Peter Horton, John Landis, and Robert Weiss.
So, Levi, why don't you try to walk us through what this movie's about?
First of all, what I love about that trailer is it's like All Quiet on the Western Front, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Out of Africa, and then Amazon Women on the Moon.
Don't you find it, and this is something I want to maybe randomly bring up later, that E.T.'s dropped in the middle of that, and E.T. is obviously a genre movie, a sci-fi movie. All Quiet on the Western Front and Out of Africa are presented as these like highbrow Oscar-winning movies, and then E.T.'s dropped in the middle of it. There's a certain element of this movie and the filmmakers involved in this movie that I've always wondered that, though I can't help but say it outright, that deep down they're jealous they're not Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Right. They're like, we didn't, but we watched all the same TV and movies they did.
Yeah.
Where's our shine? John Carpenter very famously has some things to say about Spielberg. He is in no way associated with this movie, but he's part of a generation of filmmaker that is part of this. I feel like Amazon Women on the Moon is their attempt not to obviously make the next Star Wars, but to certainly like show that, oh, well, we grew up with all that same culture too, and here's our own take on it. But anyways, it might seem like a random diversion.
Yeah. But this movie is about, it said, okay, so Amazon Women on the Moon is a 1987 American satirical science fiction film that parodies the experiencing of watching low-budget films on late-night television. I mean, that pretty much explains it all. I'll read here a little bit, though. It's interesting the way that it describes this, and then it talks about a lot of the sections individually. But fictional television station WIDB-TV Channel A experiences problems with its late-night airing of science fiction classic Amazon Women on the Moon, a 1950s B-movie in which Queen Laura, Sybil Danning, and Captain Nelson, Steve Forrest, battle exploding volcanoes and man-eating spiders on the moon. Waiting for the film to resume, an unseen viewer begins channel surfing, simulated by bursts of white noise, through late-night cable TV with the various segments and sketches of the film representing the programming found on different channels. The viewer intermittently returns to Channel 8 where Amazon Women on the Moon continues airing before faltering once more. Obviously, this was a big inspiration for something like Robot Chicken in a lot of ways as far as channel surfing and kind of...
Which that aesthetic was probably the very first thing I saw I got from Robot Chicken, and then that kind of, in a roundabout way, eventually turned me on to some of these movies that tried to recreate this
But the bulk of the movie is all of the other TV channels and kind of showing what...
And it's a combination of, like, fake film trailers, ads for fictional products, commercials for TV shows that exist in the world of the movie. And, there is no narrative through line in this in the same way that there is in Hollywood Shuffle, other than the Amazon Women on the Moon movie
and
itself.
We can jump back briefly to the Kentucky Fried Movie, which John Landis directed. Was ultimately a ZAZ, Zucker Abrams Zucker kind of production, who of course have produced so many things, but most notably Airplane and The Naked Gun. That movie was essentially an anthology sketch black comedy film, and that was many of the said former members of Groundlings and Second City. It says the feature presentation portion of the film stars Evan C. Kim as and Hapikado Grandmaster Bong Soo Han in that section that is I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm looking here. A Fistful of Yen.
Yes.
And there's a bunch of sections of that where it's like different types of movies. But yeah, that was more about like genres of films. This is a lot more about, so it's the movie version of like Amazon Women on the Moon, except it's more of sketches. This has, though, a through line of saying there's someone watching all of this.
And it almost puts us in the position of feeling like we are the one turning the channel.
Right. Because one of the great jokes in the movie is like, I'd like to talk to you about the growing, lowering attention span of today's youth, and then they turn the channel. It's like, that's probably the funniest joke in the whole movie, and it's so obvious, but it's, now you would find something like this if somebody going through TikTok would be the version of it, and that would be actually kind of interesting to do such a thing.
I feel like if you've ever watched the YouTube channel of Conor O'Malley, the comedian, he's got some really interesting to outright disturbing videos that are about people obsessed with online culture and people trying to make videos for online fame and clout. But anyways, he's an artist. It feels weird calling him that, but he is. Of a comedian who's tapping into some of these same sensations in an updated way.
I think the easiest thing to do, you want to just go through each individual thing, maybe, because there's a list of them here. And
well, first, let's maybe mention all the directors first that are involved in this.
Joe Dante, Carl Gottlieb, Peter Horton, John Landis, and Robert K. Weiss. So
this whole thing is sold as a John Landis Presents product, and he, of course, directed Kentucky Fried Movie, directed some of the biggest comedy movies of the 70s through the 80s. And so his name was one of the few that was synonymous that average people would have said,
synonymous with dangerous cinema.
Well, that too, with obviously his involvement in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. And it should
movie,
be,
which I know
yeah.
itself was an anthology.
Right,
movie.
so there's part of that to this too, considering that Joe Dante had to do with that. You know what the shame of that movie is that it's actually really good.
You talking about the Twilight Zone movie?
Yes,
Yeah.
that whole part is also not good, and it caused that to happen. His section of the movie. I think that.
Would you agree that the George Miller Nightmare at 30,000 Feet is the best section of that? That's what most people think, and I would agree.
I actually really love the Joe Dante stuff.
It is
though.
good, yeah.
I think that is the best exemplification of cartoon danger in the movie.
He's very clearly
yeah.
loves animation. That's in the
Yeah.
Gremlins movies too, in a big way.
Yeah.
And that is a great. I will say, John. I think overall, Joe Dante does the best work of this movie.
Yes.
I think across. If
Yeah.
you look at all the different things he's involved with, I think he.
But
does
that's
the
part
overall.
of why this movie was in post-production for a while, was because of the continuing legal battle over the deaths of the three people.
We
in
watched.
the making of that
We watched
movie.
a little vignette behind the scenes featurette kind of thing that was about the making of this movie on the Blu-ray that we watched. Not one thing was said about that,
Yeah.
but as you said, that's kind of the elephant in the room that is not mentioned but is there for this.
Obviously, the Spielberg section of the Twilight Zone is, I think, really good in a heartfelt way. And
Yeah.
we've talked about that before, as far as what it reminds us of our childhood in a certain way. I do think that the George Miller one is the best. But the thing about that is it doesn't feel different enough to me from the original thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that the Joe Dante
Yeah,
section
you're right.
takes that original episode and like
transforms
blows
it,
it up
yeah.
into this like totally crazy.
You're right about that. I think also
like,
Lithgow's performance in the Miller one is
Yeah.
something that elevates that one a little more. So
Yes. But no, I think there's an element of danger in the Joe Dante one that is like really good. But anyway, yeah, so Dante and Landis getting together to do this is obvious. Carl Gottlieb is one of the more interesting people to have made this.
he of course like did some of the rewrites of Jaws, and done some other things.
Yeah, and he made
too.
that movie Caveman with Ringo Starr and Barbara Bach, which I had forgotten about. He had kind of a very strange career. He was in MASH,
the movie.
Yeah, and so he actually has done a lot for the WGA, and was kind of the head of that for a while. He also was one of the writers on The Jerk.
Hilarious
as
movie.
well. Yeah, so he's done a lot of different things.
He's still alive.
Yes, he's 85, so
Yeah.
he's a little bit older, but he's kind of one of those random like journeyman workers of Hollywood that doesn't get a lot of credit.
Yeah, he's kind of a bridge
but-
between different eras too.
Right.
Yeah.
And he had, he directed the Pet House video section. I'm kind of just looking at some of these to see. He also directed. He didn't do as much, I don't think, as some of the others did.
Yeah.
The Son of the Invisible Man, which might be the overall the best one, I think, maybe. As far as the way it looks, too.
Yes, the filmmaking is really very good.
And
in
then
that.
he did the Art Sale one, which is pretty funny. I'm looking here. And then the one that got cut. Okay. So yeah, he didn't do quite as much, but Peter Horton, who was on that show 30-something, mostly known for that. But he had also, and he was in this as well. But
yeah, he's in the Michelle Pfeiffer Griffin Dunn.
Right. And then he was in a bunch of random
which
movies.
is very
and-
funny.
Right,
one
we'll
of the
get to
funnier
that
ones,
here in a minute. But and he was on a lot of TV. So he made, let's see what he directed here. He did the Two IDs with Arquette and Gutenberg. And also one that got cut, but he was also in it. Then you have Landis, of course, and his were the Mondo Condo, which I want to talk a long time about that because I have a lot
when
of
we go
thoughts
through
on
each
that.
of them, we will, yeah.
The Arsenio Hall one.
It opens the movie.
Yeah, the hospital one, which is probably my favorite one that he did. The one we just mentioned that Peter Horton was in. Blacks Without Soul. He directed all that stuff.
That's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's it. Yeah. Oh no, the Video Date one as well with
Right.
Mark McClure and Russ Meyer and Andrew Dice Clay.
Mm-hmm.
And so we already talked about him. And then Robert K. Weiss, who randomly directed a lot of these. And he's not somebody I'm exactly like really familiar with. It seems he was kind of worked with. Oh yeah, he kind of worked with the Zucker Abrams Zucker people. So that's the main kind of like. And he was a producer on the Blues Brothers. Yeah, he was a big producer primarily. And also worked with Lorne Michaels a lot. It seems. So yeah, he kind of was more of a producer, but he directed a random amount of these. So he did all the stuff with the guy inside the TV.
Yeah.
Also the Amazon Women on the Moon sections.
Yeah.
The Silly Pate, which is weird.
Yeah.
Video
that was among
Pirates.
the more disposable ones.
Yeah, Video Pirates.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Titan Man, about the Titan condoms with Ralph Bellamy. First Lady of the Evening, which is randomly one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, it is.
I
It's
think
very
like-
short, but it's
Yeah,
I think it's pretty funny.
Like, what? Yeah, it's a very specific kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's all the different ones that were done. Did we talk about Dante specifically, what he had done? I'll
No,
go over those.
yeah.
So Dante did the Joe Pantoliano hair loomings.
Which is randomly pretty funny, I think.
We will come to your home and get... yeah, it's
The whole
so
thing's funny,
weird.
but a lot of that
Yeah.
comes down to Joey Pantoliano's performance, I feel like.
Bull S or Not, Critics Corner, and the
sequel.
Roast Your Loved One.
Yeah.
Which is overall probably my favorite, some of my favorite
Yeah.
stuff. One that got cut, which was the French Ventriloquist's Dummy, which apparently had Dick Miller in it, which I don't know.
Yeah.
And then Reckless Youth, which is the Carrie Fisher, Paul Bartel Reefer Madness parody,
Yeah.
basically. Which is at the very
It's
end.
about
of the
like
movie.
young
Right,
women
yeah.
going into cities and living wild, like
Right,
basically
yeah.
old, like-
Mary Brown. Come in, Mary Brown.
No, that one was the first time I ever saw Paul Bartel
Yeah.
in anything.
Yeah.
And of course later I saw like Eden Raoul and Death Race 2000.
And all the movies
some
he's
other
in
things.
of Joe Dante's
Yeah,
movies.
but I remember seeing that and thinking that's a weird looking man. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just like, and it's in black and white too.
Yeah.
So that adds another.
He
but,
reminds
like, I remember
me
thinking
of,
I don't know. That sounds
he
like a
reminds
scary
me of
guy.
people that I know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's strange. So you want to go through each of these
Yeah.
now, I guess? Okay. So the first section of the movie is Arsenio Hall in the Mondo Condo section as a man who experiences a series of mishaps around his apartment.
Which the whole thing, moment to moment, is chuckle worthy.
Yes.
But in sum total, I'm like, what's this all about? Like, I don't
And it doesn't
understand,
fit
like,
into the rest of the
no,
movie.
it feels very.
It's
like,
not part
okay.
of the experience of watching the channel surfing. You know,
What's he trying to say with all that? Is it like, oh, it's just so challenging to like just sit down and enjoy yourself? There's all these little stupid
I think that's
pratfalls,
part of
like-
it. But as we
And
talked
he,
about,
well, also
yeah,
real
go
quick,
ahead.
obviously he probably has much of the same love of animation that Dante has, even though Dante's on probably steroids. But he's not as talented at like translating Looney Tunes style humor into live action physical comedy in the way that Dante is.
Right.
And so it just feels like he's trying to do a version of that and falling flat. But what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know. It just feels kind of, and I know we already talked a lot about this, and have already ripped Landis a new one in his own way. But doesn't it? And we talked about time. It's like strays real close to and goes over the line of just straight up minstrelsy in a lot of ways. Of just like, oh, look at this black man getting sprayed in the face, and this black man
these
falling
goofy
through
faces
this,
he's going to make.
right? And it just feels very.
I imagine Robert Townsend watching this
Yes.
movie after it made Hollywood Shuffle and kind of shaking his head and chuckling like, okay, like that's.
And there's even that part in last week we kind of talked about it, and it's in the trailer for Mo Better Blues, where he's like, you could just stay home and watch Arsenio Hall or something, you know, and
Yeah.
like, and what a big deal that Arsenio Hall actually was in,
as a
in
black
social aspect.
as a black talk show
Right.
host, you know,
Ghost. What?
Ghost, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that feels
I agree.
It's not only that. It just feels like, why is this in the movie? Like, the one thing that's worth it to me though is the moment where he tries to turn on TV and it literally explodes. And it's not even the actual moment. It cuts back to him and he kind of just like gives up.
Or he jumps out the window.
Yeah, and then he stands up to walk away, and there's just a shot, and it's
like total madness.
It's just literally the explosion.
It's all the debris.
It just is so funny.
Yeah.
Just the way it looks is just hilarious.
That is funny. Yeah, I agree. I agree on the whole thing though. Like I said, moment to moment, it's chuckle worthy. But as you watch and you think about the whole thing, you're like, why is this here exactly?
All right. So Pet House Video, which is the Carl Gottlieb one about the woman Monique Gabrielle. That
also feels very like, okay.
It's like the whole point of that, I guess, is to say, like, I don't know. I guess it's trying to say something about like supermodels or softcore pornography or pornographic stars,
full on nudity.
Yeah, that when they walk out in public, that's what people see them as in its own way. But I don't know. That one kind of doesn't make as much sense to me. Murray in Videoland. This is a Robert K. Weiss one, the one with Lou Jacoby as.
It's about basically this old man who's all excited he's got a remote control now, and he's got this bickering wife that's like, I just want to watch TV and not pay attention to my wife. And then he gets like sucked into the TV and the different programs, and it varies between like a news weather report, a baseball game,
right? Which Phil Hartman is one of the commentators of.
Oh yeah, I remember thinking there was a familiar voice in there. I couldn't remember who it was. Like an old King Kong movie. And again, as the channels get changed, he's in these new worlds, and then eventually he resurfaces a few times in the movie. At one point in the Son of the Invisible Man section,
and different. Yeah, and he was in Amazon Women on the Moon.
I feel like
section.
That's probably among the more memorable things because of the whole movie, because that's like simulating what we feel as watching the movie as this channel surfer, and we're just going between all these worlds, and he's literally being forced between all these.
That
one's
pretty funny, and it's the most. It's kind of the through line of the movie in a certain way. Hospital, directed by Landis, which pound for pound, in a lot of ways, I think is one of the funnier ones.
And a lot of that's owed to Griffin Dunne.
And that's Michelle Pfeiffer, Peter Horton, and Griffin Dunne. So to explain this briefly, it's about a this man and woman who have a baby, Michelle Pfeiffer and Peter Horton, and Griffin Dunne's the doctor, and he's like, all right, we're going to bring the baby in just a minute. And they lost the baby, but he keeps coming in with like different versions of fake babies,
like a Mr. Potato Head doll, and then he's got like a finger puppet at one point,
and
he just keeps going on, and a lot of that's owed to Griffin Dunne's brilliance as a performer. And we were talking too while we were watching this about, I said something along the lines of, Griffin Dunne had a great career, so I'm not trying to say,
and it's still
like a lot of what ifs, but like. Imagine an alternate reality where he was an even bigger star than he was. I mean, he's in some things here and there, but imagine if he had this big sitcom that he was on, and that might be like, well, that's the best thing you can think of him for.
Yeah,
but
right.
But he was just a more bigger star, and Levi said something that I think is very true, where it's like, well, his specificity as a performer is one of his greatest traits, and who was it else you mentioned? Somebody like him, or I can't remember.
I can't remember who I'd said.
You said oh God, Dan Hedaya.
Yeah, that's
said,
it. Yeah,
and,
which is random to compare those two, but yeah, right.
And so I do think Griffin Dunne will probably always, if nothing else, be remembered for After Hours and American Werewolf in London, his character and performance in that.
By the way, I have to interrupt you for a second to look at that movie Chilly Scenes of Winter that exists. Okay, so first of all, it was originally called Head Over Heels. Look at the poster for that. Is that not the creepiest thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, very creepy.
It's like, what? So everybody go. Hopefully, it's still there. The Chilly Scenes of Winter poster.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we need to watch at some point because I've got the Blu-ray of it. But yeah, I don't know what that is. But anyway, that he's in. But yeah, like I said, it works in the sense of, well, he had his career in its own way. I mean, he was in After Hours and Johnny Dangerously and Big Girls Don't Cry. They get even. But yeah, I mean, he was in stuff that was obviously good. But
I mean, there is that one moment that Levi immortalized by, I think, filming of that shot in Step Kids where it's like it's the most luxurious.
That's what I'm going to use to promote this week. I think.
Yeah,
is that moment. So.
And as we've talked about, I think with this Step Kids before, it's like how perfect is it that it's like the counterpoint is him or our boy. Oh God, the other man that's in it, David Strathairn.
Yes,
it's like those are the two men that mother
we're gonna
could have.
Go down the river. That's what we're gonna do. But Don DeLillo in the flesh. But yeah, one of my favorite parts in this one is where.
Speaking of Don DeLillo, I was going to mention this about Griffin Dunne. I think he was the one who basically convinced DeLillo to write the script for Game 6 or whatever, that screenplay that DeLillo wrote.
Well, he's in the literary world anyway because he's like the nephew of John Gregory Dunne, who's a writer and was married to Joan Didion. So, yeah.
Anyways.
But, yeah, one of my favorite lines in this, though, is where they're like, you lost our baby. He's like, hey, jump all over me. What about the 9 kids I didn't lose this week? And then that woman, the nurse comes in, she's like, he was lying in the laundry hamper. Wow. Hair looming, that one's so short. We already kind of talked about that one. That's like an a commercial. Some of these are like real short because they're commercials, but that's the Joe Dante one of Joe Pantoliano. Like he was bald and then he got basically carpet on his head.
And especially at the very beginning, there's where he's very clearly reading the cue cards.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Cy Swerdlow. And his name is Cy Swerdlow. But yeah. Then there's the Amazon Women on the Moon section, which we can talk about in general.
It feels like, one of the first things I think of, and you're even more studied in 50s B movies than I am, one of the first things I think of is like Forbidden Planet. As far as, now that movie looks terrific. I mean, you're like, this came out back then. I mean, that's a really good movie. But I mean, as far as like, they're visiting this planet and they're all in like the overall like, almost adding this layer of, obviously, even more so with that movie, but like Shakespearean operatic
that's
nature,
what I was going to say
is kind of parodying
I think what works about Forbidden Planet, and why that movie's so good, is, and why it's clearly the best 50s sci-fi movie, pretty obviously.
Between that and Day the Earth Stood Still.
And like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like. But as far as like the space movie. Is because
it was Star Wars for the 50s.
It was a high pedigree of movie because, like you said, it's got. I mean, it's an adaptation of Shakespeare, which automatically is going to level it up.
Yeah.
Then it's got like some of the, and the production design is so lush, but also specifically some of the. There's like the monster in the movie that comes from his mind, and it's like not seen except for a few moments. Mm-hmm. They've specifically brought Disney animators in to work on that. So there's like, it feels like everybody working on it is like the highest pedigree possible.
Beautiful color for that era.
Yes, and the music is so good. Like, it feels like a true blue movie.
It feels like what people think 50s B movies are, but it only was that nostalgia, but it's actually that one movie.
Because I keep thinking of that, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, it reminded me of Forbidden Planet. My 50s kind of sci-fi horror version of that is mostly in the more B movie vein, which that technically is a B movie, but it's like a movie on that level. But that is, I think, what we all remember those movies are, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, an instructive version of, this is actually usually what it is like out in, like, Bronson Cave. Mm-hmm. They went and shot for a while, and they were like, it's all this very obvious, like, Brooklyn Dodges, and, like, because, I mean, I always joke with, because I was actually talking about Forbidden Planet a random amount this week with some of the kids when we went through the...
I haven't seen it in a long time. I'd like to rewatch it.
Yeah, we should do that at some point. But that guy, the main kind of dad villain in it, reminds me of Rip Torn randomly. Like old Rip Torn, but in the 50s.
Like him,
but I was talking with that movie a little bit with some kids this week because we went to the Air and Space Museum stuff at the Udvar Hazy Center, where that is now. And they had some Robbie the Robot statue kind of in a case because it was talking about like retrofuturism. And I said, this is that movie where literally like the robot, there's a guy that's like, make me some liquor. And it's like, okay. And like gives him all this like liquor. this whiskey it makes for
Yeah.
him or whatever. And like, but I was like, and I felt while I was watching that, you have that character in this who was like that really dumb, like character, and he would like had the Brooklyn Dodgers hat and he had the monkey with him and like
clearly comic relief,
right?
yeah.
And it was like that was that movie's version of that.
Yeah.
And even still, that was with like Robbie the Robot, who is kind of funny, but inherently
was also in Lost in Space. I don't even
Right.
know what the rights are.
Yeah.
How that followed through with that, but I
Right.
know that also associated with that show.
But
in
in
the
many
60s.
ways, that more inspired something like R2-D2 than it did C-3PO in the sense of like a more serious beep boop bleep robot than like I'm so funny all the time, which I mean C-3PO wasn't trying to be funny, he was just neurotic. But like
Woody Allen in space.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like that was it's weird to call Robbie the Robot serious, but there was kind of a menace to that character, kind of a silent menace
right.
that was similar to the Gort character in Day the Earth Stood Still, but more human even than that, obviously.
Mhm.
But that's all to just say that, like, you look at this and you kind of laugh and you're like, yeah, this actually isn't as... Like, you think about
Prodigious
Forbidden
as that,
Planet,
yeah.
and you're like, that's actually really pretty great, and this is not,
Mhm.
And so, yeah, this is more like some of those other productions that were very low budget and very crappy of that time that were more like the Twilight Zone. It's honestly more like a Twilight Zone episode.
Mhm.
Or
Without
even like,
without any
yeah.
sense of social commentary,
or even those
to it.
1960s like Doris. You've heard of Doris Wishman, I'm
Yeah,
sure, at
yeah.
some point, like those like Nude on the Moon, or some
Yeah.
of those like literal pornography, basically. that was
Smutty
being made.
softcore porn. Maybe,
Yeah, that was like more like that than it is. But anyway, that's all to just say. This is like I think one of the thankless but also kind of nothing things in the movie where
Yeah.
it's funny.
Well, if nothing
to a
else, it's the
point,
bridging,
right?
The bridging agent between all these other
Yeah.
things.
It's funny to a point, but it actually isn't really worth a
Yeah,
whole lot.
I agree.
And so that's kind of it's funny we said all that, and then like but it whatever. So that's all to prove how good Forbidden Planet is, basically. But
who directed Forbidden Planet?
I know I've heard the name, but I can't remember. I'm looking here. It's Fred M. Wilcox, who also made Lassie Comes Home. This is the Forbidden Planet's the biggest thing he had made. He made some of them Lassie movies and The Secret Garden, Shadow in the Sky. So yeah, by far Forbidden Planet is like his biggest thing.
Yeah.
He died in the 60s, so he didn't really make a whole lot. But yeah, so there were other movies, like Fire Maidens from Outer Space, which, wow, if you look at this poster, it's just like WTF. But so yeah, it's a little more like movies like that. Some people call that the worst movie ever made. Or Catwomen of the Moon. So there were a lot of movies in the 50s that were like that, or Queen of Outer Space. Actually, I think this is a lot like Queen from Outer Space.
Makes sense as far as this being this matriarchy society
it
it
was
seems depicted in this.
Based on an idea supplied by Ben Hecht. Don't you love there were a lot of those like eras there where it was like from an idea by...
Like scribbled it on a napkin.
Right. So yeah, Ben Hecht was like, well, if they had a queen on the moon, and they're like, let's make a movie out of that.
Yeah. He's like, I was kidding, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was on Venus. Yeah, but I think it's funny. There's so many things about Venus. Is like that's literally uninhabitable. But
Yeah.
okay. Actually, you know what's funny about Queen of Outer Space is that was a double feature with the film Frankenstein 1970 with Boris Karloff. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So that's that movie that was like I always wanted to see, but was like in the future, Frankenstein makes like Dr. Frankenstein makes another Frankenstein's monster, but yeah, that he got tortured by Nazis or something. But it's like a future. It's like in the future. It's like really weird that whole idea. I always wanted to see that, but I never have. Anyway, that's all. Just say that the Amazon Women on the Moon is serviceable, but not anything in particular. Blacks Without Soul which is Landis directed, that had David Allen Greer as Don No Soul Simmons, as well as a male and female Republican, William Bryant and Roxy Roker, Letary as the pimp, and Christopher Broughton as the fan club president, and of course B.B. King.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, basically, John Landis said, and we won't go into all the things that he said about B.B. King in this, but he said, I gots to work. Basically, he said, I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
You know, because he literally made that whole score for Into the Night, which we've already done a podcast on, obviously.
Yeah. That's some of my favorite stuff in the movie, mostly because of David Allen Greer's performance and how, like, it almost gets, like, the whole in the movie, the whole message of Blacks Without Souls almost gets co-opted. It's like, no, actually, it's just going to be about all of Don Simmons' music.
Don Soul Simmons, No Soul Simmons is a triumph.
Yeah, it's like the movie treats it as, and I just think that's really
some
funny.
Some of the greatest love songs ever recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was some of the name of those songs that it said that it was on the his album?
Which
remember?
one? So, the Ballad of the... Well, okay, so it said he had two... Okay, we're getting kind of away from the Black Without Soul thing, but we'll talk about this for a second. So they came back with that character later and had another commercial of, he's making these songs or whatever.
Yeah.
But he made one album, and then it said there was the Down and Funky album, which had Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog, Joy to the World by Three Dog Night, and then it was like Ballad of the Green Beret, or like, and then Ballad of Tom Dooley, and like, How Much Is That Doggy in the Window?
Yeah, that
like,
was the one.
And, like stupid crap like that. That's like in California Dreaming, you know, like very white bread, like Carpenters and Mamas and the Papas versions of rock and roll. You know? Like, and so that was funny that it was like, and the first one of Tie Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree, like and Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog, and How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? You know, like
So anyways, I think all that's really funny, mostly due to David Allen Greer.
Yeah, but the whole joke is that B.B. King's like it's almost like a telethon-esque thing.
Yeah.
You need to help these black people that are born without soul, and they're basically white people.
And then there's
who are black,
this one black kid's like a member of the David Hartman fan club, and he's like, "What? I even met David Hartman. What a neat guy."
My favorite one of those is actually the pimp, who's like, "I love this. I love good gas mileage on this car." Like, and then obviously the
and had the black golfing Republicans,
right?
Another couple.
By the way, look, okay, William Bryant as male Republican. This is the picture that shows up. There must be a broken link somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody named William Bryant who is not black. Let's just say very definitively. Very confusing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's all very funny. But I think the winner of the movie is the Don No Soul Simmons stuff. Just of like David Allen Greer as this like very like a white black man basically is very funny. But two IDs
puts you in a new concept of the whole thing after seeing like Get Out though.
Yeah.
As far as is there like a Get Out situation with this character, you know?
And I'm thinking also of the one where it's like him playing on the piano this song, and then it cuts to like around. He's like in this oval, and there's these white people making out or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But no, really, with that moment when it's like, why do birds suddenly appear every time you walk by? Like, and it's like some of the greatest love songs ever recorded. It's like it's so bad. Like, but two IDs by Peter Horton. That was the Rosanna Arquette, Steve Guttenberg. I think that's pretty funny.
It is. It doesn't exactly match with everything else because it's almost like, and this is true of a few of these, where it's not ostensibly a TV show exactly. It's not an ad. It's not a trailer. It's just a kind of just like a comedy sketch.
There are some of these in
which
here,
I think that is actually pretty funny.
Hospital is like that.
Yeah,
too,
which I think is pretty funny, and I do like. But
that one's funny and just in the sense.
I mean, it feels like it could be an SNL sketch.
Yeah, just in the sense of the idea of like men treating women badly, and we've got all this written down about you. Like, you know, that is.
And then
funny,
has a funny punchline at the end where he's like, where she rejects him. And then he's like, all right, well, I'll call up this other woman that I kind of left hanging. And then she's like, oh, yeah, I'll hang. But then it ends like, oh, but I'm going to need your credit card and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to need your info to check you.
That kind of reminds me of the Seinfeld bit where Elaine keeps having trouble, keeps giving doctors trouble, and they're on that list, and they keep writing on her file. Yeah. It's kind of a similar thing. But all right, so Bull S or Not with Henry Silva as himself.
Which was the
Joe
clip
Dante
we played
directed.
last week.
This one I think is so hilarious.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, it's like that Believe It or Not, Ripley's Believe It or Not stuff of like,
and also like true crime kind of back in that day.
But it's like, was Jack the Ripper the Loch Ness monster?
Yeah,
and
it's this totally absurd, ridiculous thing, and then it like shoots like a recreation of the 19th century, and then it's got like. Literally,
although this is a Bull S reenactment,
the Loch Ness monster, like clearly monster, but then dressed up like in the Victorian era, just like
And it's like the prostitute's fooled, and she's walking away, and it does this.
I got her now. Like
that's literally one of the funniest things ever. That's a very Joe Dante image too, of like this big, monster thing, like. And then they come back later with the Titanic. What really happened? And it's like...
And then I love it says, like, literally a title says Bull S reenactment.
Yeah. And did I take this job for a quick buck? We would never know the answer to these questions. Like, but yeah, that's obviously really great and one of the funnier things. We can talk about these together now of Critics Corner by Dante and Roast Your Loved One by Dante as far as...
Well, let's just real quickly just say, like...
to
that real quick.
Silly
like,
Pate.
That was kind of very disposable. A party game where you can take your pate and, it could be your favorite comic strip.
Randomly has Ira Newborn who did, like, the score for the movie.
But anyways, so that was very disposable. Right. Probably among the more cuttable ones in the movie.
Yeah.
But like you said, Critics Corner and... Roast Your Loved One is basically it's like part 1 and part 2 basically of this sketch.
Yeah.
Where it's basically this totally hapless loser comes back home after working all day, turns on the TV, finds this parody of Ebert and Roper or Ebert and Siskel and Ebert. Shows you that what I've seen a little bit more when it came on. And they're like reviewing these
that
movies.
Statement's almost more dated because it was a specific time where it was Ebert and Roper.
Exactly.
But anyway,
and it turns out they're like reviewing his life, and then it's like, and he's like, "What?" And then like they're talking about, "Whoa, so predictable. What a loser! Like who would ever want to be
here's
this guy?"
Here's a scene from his life,
and then it looks exactly like it looked like when they looked and watched a scene.
Yeah, it's like them looking at it.
And it's just like scenes from his life, and you're like, how are they?
And they
shot
cut back,
this?
and he's they're like, wow, like so bad.
And then you mentioned one of the funniest like lines in the movies where he's like, about he's stuck in a loveless
dead end job and a loveless marriage, and
he's like, how do
they know that?
And then they're like, oh, but the ending, and then he literally has a heart attack while he's watching it and dies.
Right.
And then it goes to his funeral where you have all these like older comedians of that era like just roasting him while he's
so it's Rip Taylor, Slappy White, that's the name just makes me laugh, Jackie Vernon, Henny Youngman, Charlie Callis, and Steve Allen, who obviously most notably, other than being on the Tonight Show, did a lot of those roasts originally.
And his own wife gets in on the action,
right? And we can talk about some of these individual roasts.
The Rip Taylor ones were so. I'll be honest, I've still not seen much of him even outside of this movie. I know he was a figure of that time where he's just throwing this confetti all the time. And,
one of the funny things, he's like, "I don't dance. This is it." Like he's like, "Get into it." Like.
There's one shot in particular where like
it's shot.
You see like watching her, and you don't even really see him, but then you see the confetti. You see the confetti going in the screen. It's just like a really funny image, but.
Yeah, and Belinda Belaski, who was in a lot of Joe Dante movies, she was in The Howling and Piranha and Gremlins 2 and Matinee and Small Soldiers, so she worked with him a lot.
Yeah,
but she's the wife of Harvey Pitnick. But yeah, the Rip Taylor stuff's funny. Slappy White. He was actually on Sanford and Son. I was going to say he's kind of, worked with Red Fox. I was going to say he reminds me kind of Red Fox's style of stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
that he was on the quote the Chitlin circuit of stand up was what that was called.
Before,
yeah, Red Fox. So, it was on a show called That's My Mama. I've never heard of that, but Jackie Vernon, who randomly isn't even he's in the movie, but he gives no stand up whatsoever. But supposedly his stuff was so funny, but they just didn't have time for it, so they cut it out.
We saw some of that in the
and he's randomly Frosty the
special
Snowman.
features. Yeah,
Voice of Frosty the Snowman.
Never really heard him talk, and then I was like, oh wait, that's the voice of Frosty.
And then Henny Youngman, obviously, we know Henny Youngman from a lot of things. Goodfellas most notably, but what was so funny about this to me is he don't even make it about Harvey. He makes it about his own stand-up.
He's just going to do his stand-up
Take
routine.
my wife, please. Like, why do Jewish divorces cost so much? Because they're worth it. Like, why do Jewish men die before their wives? Because they want to. Like,
very deadpan, comedy.
And then Charlie Callis, who I just think is so hilarious. Yeah. It says he worked a lot with Mel Brooks and Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin kind of era. He was on that TV show Switch with Eddie Albert and Robert Wagner.
Yeah.
From the 70s. Also was the voice of Elliot the Dragon in Pete's Dragon. That's probably the biggest thing he'd be known for.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of stand-up and talk shows and stuff. He's just really funny. He's only a little bit...
Also, who's the guy that... is in it as like somebody who works for the funeral home.
I'll get to it in a second. I want to talk about Steve Allen real quick.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, he's just Steve Allen more or less.
Yeah, he was. To younger generations, again, he was this huge TV figure in kind of the earlier days.
Had been the first Tonight Show. I think it was him, and then like Jack Parr, and then like Johnny Carson. Maybe I think there was like one or two others in there, but yeah, he kind of presided over the. Also, was regularly on What's My Line and had the Steve Allen Show, and obviously did a lot of those roasts and stuff. So he kind of is obviously the roast master. But yeah, so then Robert Picardo, who was in a lot of Joe Dante stuff. He was in Inner Space. He was also on the Wonder Years. It's probably the biggest thing he's known for, as well as China Beach, which is a show I've always randomly wanted to watch. It was like about Da Nang in Vietnam. And it's like, it was basically MASH for Vietnam, more or less, in the 80s and 90s. So it's kind of like, why would anybody have ever made that? But inspired by Home Before Morning, Story of an Army Nurse. It's like, please. But yeah, he's in it. He's pretty funny.
He's really funny.
Yeah, because he's like, he's like, it's time. She's like, is it really time? He's like, yeah, we need the room at 4. But overall, that's just such a random.
Well, I think also there's like the initial shock of it being a sequel,
right?
To
it's
an
like,
earlier sketch, like that is going on.
Harvey Picnic, whatever.
Yeah.
Look at that. I think the best Weiss one is probably the Video Pirates, which is
basically it's shot like a. Like a 40s, 50s, like pirate movie, but they're like trying to take video cassettes and laser discs.
Yeah, William Marshall was the pirate captain. He was in Blackula. Most of what he's known for.
Obviously. Out of Africa poster
King
in
of
the
Cartoons,
background.
Also in the Pee-wee's Playhouse. Remember? Which I always thought that was so cool that they did that on Pee-wee's Playhouse. They would take these old cartoons and repackage them in that format. I think that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I'm sorry. What were you saying though?
I was just going to say another random Out of Africa mention in this is in the background, like the poster.
Yeah, right.
Like,
yeah.
You can tell they're really getting off on like Out of Africa, that being this big, which we talked about in the past with Sidney Pollack.
Which I haven't seen, but yeah, you have. But yeah, randomly Tino Insana was in this too as the Mr. Silvio, who's basically the like Shmee. Captain, pirate captain, but yeah, that he was randomly one of the kind of creators and main writers on Police Squad, which we talked about in the past, which is totally hilarious if you've never seen that. Also was in that movie Neighbors, which you recently bought, and Three Amigos. Who's Harry Crumb, The Couch Trip, Oscar, Beverly Hills Cop 3. So basically all the John Landis films. But anyway, so he's in that a little bit. But yeah, that actually honestly works more as a way to introduce Son of the Invisible Man.
Yes.
Which I'll kind of cede this to you because I know this. I love this one, but I know this is one of your favorite ones. Of Gottlieb did.
Yeah. So as we were watching this, we were talking about this is one of the best Son of the Invisible Man. Is one
this
of the
and Reefer Madness, I think.
Yes.
Or the what is it called? The Reckless Youth.
Yeah. One of the best recreations of like 30s era or older film that I've seen, other than like Guy Madden, which Guy Madden's going for something a little more artistic and more surreal. But it just looks like if you squint not very long, you think it is actually a movie from the 1930s. And if anything, I wanted that one to go on longer, and that's kind of Ed Begley Jr., of course, who we love. He's basically playing the son of the Invisible Man and thinks he's invisible, but the whole joke is he's clearly in plain sight and he's just walking around naked and doing stuff to people, and they very clearly see him and they're acting like they don't. But anyways, that one's very brief, but it feels brief anyways, but it's very well done, I think.
And I like that it's in the... and we've talked a lot about the Invisible Man. I used to did a whole podcast on it. One of our randomly better podcasts, I think.
It was very early.
It was like number 3, wasn't it?
3, I think, yeah.
Because it was like Jurassic Park, American Graffiti, that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what I love about that is it does feel kind of like those, because it's using the exact same sets, you can tell. Which is kind of crazy that they had those, or that they recreated them that well. I don't know. But just the idea of like, kind of the inherent comedy of the fact that he's walking around naked all the time, and like just how crazy he is that he thinks that nobody sees me, and it's just a very funny.
There's not a whole lot to say about it, but it just looks really good.
Also has one of our favorite character actors ever, Gary Goodrow, as the checker player, who of course was the thing he will be most remembered for, probably. Is being in Seinfeld as the
fictionalized Kramer,
other Kramer,
in season 4,
and but I mean he's been in a bunch of stuff.
We always remember him in the Three Little Pigs, Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater.
Right. He actually died back about 10 years ago. I didn't know he was dead. I mean, I knew he'd be older.
He looks a lot like Michael Richards, so it makes sense they would cast him in that.
Right.
He's also in Home Alone.
Yeah. Oh, right. I knew there was something else he was.
So he's involved in a household accident.
Talking about a different person here. Hang on. Actually, I'm looking. Larry Hankin is who I'm talking about. Never mind.
Okay.
No, we were talking about the same person, but I got the wrong name. Larry Hankin is that guy's name.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if he's still there. Hang on. Yes, he is living, because I actually saw him in something here a while back. I can't remember what it was. No, so actually, here's some of the things he's been in. Sergeant Larry Balzac in Home Alone. Larry Balzac. Just think about that name for 2 seconds. Oh, he was in Breaking Bad. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
And he actually... Oh, okay, he was friends with Carl Gottlieb, so that's how kind of his career was. And then he was in Escape from Alcatraz... Of course, he was in Plane, Trains, and Automobiles as Doobie. But anyway, he's part of that whole kind of group of Barney Miller he was on. Star Trek Next Generation is a wind dancer. I don't know what that means. But so he's still living is in things here and there. But Larry Hankin's great. He's another one of those that's like, man, I wish he would have done more things, but what we got with him was great. So, all right, quickly, we're jumping over some stuff that wasn't even actually made here. Art Sale with John Engel. Now, he was in a lot of random stuff. He was in True Stories, which is normally what we think of him in. Playing kind of a similar character, honestly. And this is like where they're having to it's like basically imagining...
museums going out of business, so it's like a fire sale, basically.
Right, and it's like, you get the Declaration of Independence.
It's like every Van Gogh must go.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're like
ridiculous...
ridiculously low prices that would make no sense. But that's pretty short, but pretty funny, I think.
First Lady of the Evening.
Who did that one, by the way?
Weiss made. Oh, Gottlieb did that.
All right, okay.
First Lady of the Evening by Weiss. It says.
So this is like basically a fictional adaptation of this like sex thriller book about what if the First Lady was cheating on the president, and it's like I love just the inherent comedy of like the guy she's cheating with happens to sneak into the White House to like have an affair.
It's randomly the teacher, the creepy teacher guy in American Graffiti of all things, Terry McGovern. So yeah, that's funny that he's randomly in this. Hang on a second, I'm looking at something here. Okay, anyway. But yeah, that's pretty funny. It's very short. That's a very specific joke that a lot of people might not even get, but one that I don't really get totally, and I think it's because of what it's about, maybe, is just inherently kind of stupid to me, is Titan Man, which Weiss made. This is basically about a kid who...
This is another thing that could have been just a sketch in another show or a TV show, basically.
A kid goes to...
Buy
condoms, and it's from his... And it's randomly Mr. Gower, which is the name of the pharmacist in... It's a Wonderful Life. I was kind of thinking about the whole time, so that's like inherently a reference to that. But basically, the idea of the people that you know, and like they're disappointed in you for doing that. Like basic crap. Yeah. It's just pretty whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
Nothing really there. Don't really want to talk about it. Moving on. Kelly Preston's randomly in it, and Ralph Bellamy.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame Ralph Bellamy got wasted on that. But one thing that is funny in that, it's like he's turning to get the stuff, but then he turns back like he's gonna say something, but then he just turns back. Right. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right, and two more here. Video Date, which Landis directed, which has Mark McClure, Russ Meyer, Corinne Wall, and Andrew Dice Clay.
I like the way that one's made, but I don't. About the story of it, I'm just like, okay, so what? Because it ends with him Mark McClure's character being arrested in the reality of the sketch, and it's like, why would that happen? That's dumb because it's just going for comedy. But
I think Andrew Dice Clay's really funny
he's funny,
but it's just because that's Andrew Dice Clay. So
I love Mark McClure anytime I see him pop up because he of course played Jimmy Olsen. And there's it's not as present as I remember it being, but there's a Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen comic book sitting beside of his desk, where he's sitting to watch TV. He's also, of course, one of the brothers in Back to the Future, Marty McFly. So I like him, but again, it was kind of.
Can I randomly defend it for 2 seconds before I agree with you?
Yeah.
With the inclusion of Russ Meyer, I think what they're going for here, and this is very pretentious, but is to simulate the feeling of watching a Russ Meyer movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, of like the idea of what that
you feeling complicit in
right,
it,
or like the weirdness of that. Now I haven't actually seen a Russ Meyer movie yet,
but you know what they are.
But I know what they are, and I've seen some Herschel Gordon Lewis films, which are very similar. And so that's what they're trying to go for, is like he's giving you this thing, and like you've never seen anything like this before, but then it feels so dangerous, like you feel filthy and like you're gonna be arrested for doing it. Like
that makes sense.
But
that's a good point. But,
whatever, but it's kind of dumb. So
yeah.
And Reckless Youth.
If it almost would have been started off as a comedy, and got more actually kind of dark. In a real way, not like in a sketch comedy way. Like that might have actually meant something, but to that point. But anyways,
but Reckless Youth, the last one. So this is after the credits. Joe Dante made.
This is this is really terrific. Also, like with
it's not like
Invisible Man. It's like really captures the look of 30s film,
and it's not exactly like a laugh out loud kind of funny. It's a very specific. Inside baseball funny genre experiment of like, what if we made one of these like social films of the 30s about a very vague social disease is what it's called. But it has Carrie Fisher as Mary Brown. I love he's like, let's call her Mary Brown.
Mary Brown.
And it's like, well, you call her whatever you want. I don't know what you want me to call her because I don't know what this is. It's kind of funny. It's like, let's do that, shall we? It's like, whatever, man. I'm here to watch.
I know it's a different thing, but it reminded me of, what does it say in Lost Horizon at the very beginning? It's like the old chicken farm.
Yeah, it's like It's like, I don't know. You're telling me, like, It's like when people say, so I'm going down the street, right? It's like, I don't know. what you're doing.
But what's crazy is this is such a spot-on parody of a certain type of movie back then that I almost blink and like, oh, wait, is this real though? Actually, because it easily feels like it could be because of this propagandistic quality of it about like legislating morality, especially in the era of like the Hays Code being implemented more so.
And just the Paul Bartel as that like weird doctor.
Like I said, when I first saw him, I was like, this is one of the weirdest looking guys ever. I don't know if I'd ever want to be in a room alone with him. I remember specifically thinking, and I hadn't even seen Eating Raoul yet or these other things.
He died in 2000, so he wasn't very old.
Yeah. And I think the world of Eating Raoul, by the way, that's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen.
And he kind of came out of the whole Andy Warhol kind of like
what's that woman?
Mary Warnov, that's in all his movies or a lot of them. And of course, he was in Rock and Roll High School and Get Crazy. So he was in a lot of Alan Arkish stuff, Chopping Mall. But yeah, obviously, Eating Raoul was like, and of course, he directed Death Race 2000, which we can't forget.
I mentioned that earlier.
Was such a big thing and really a pretty good movie. And then Private Parts, he made a movie called, he was in a movie called Big Bad Mama. It was kind of a Roger Corman movie.
Yeah.
Heart Beeps. Alan Arkish made. So yeah, he was part of that whole New World cinema, kind of thing. But yeah, what's funny about this too to me, there's that part where it's like he says, "Let's call him John something," and they cut, and it's literally like footage of Bela Lugosi from Island of Lost Souls, and he's like, he got started smoking cigarettes or whatever, and then he's like, "Stop it! We don't have any cigarettes." Like,
I love too, like when he's like taking her into that dungeon area, like when the door like opens and you see the background, it just looks like any hallway. And then all of a sudden it's like a dungeon. I just always thought that's a randomly underrated, funny moment.
But yeah, that whole thing is just so genius, and I really want kind of more of that. It just felt very.
Another thing is too, I mean, it could easily get buried under everything else, but Carrie Fisher's randomly pretty funny in that.
Yeah,
and Carrie Fisher also similarly when we're talking about Griffin Dunne, she played friggin' Princess Leia, so she's gonna always be remembered for that. But she was very funny, and like even in When Harry Met Sally, I think she's one of the best friends of like Meg Ryan in that movie. She's really funny in that.
Right.
I don't know why we didn't get more Carrie Fisher in the world either, but
it's a shame. I mean, well, and not to be too negative, but I mean, she kind of.
She had, a lot of problems.
Self-destructive issues.
And I mean, Postcard, by the way, I think I mentioned this a while back on some podcast, but Postcards from the Edge I saw for the first time some months ago, a year plus ago now, I can't quite remember. And that was quite good, and I was pretty impressed by that. And I know that was based partially on her life. And
Postcards from the Edge, and I'm thinking.
But anyways, that's good.
So, all that.
That's all that. So, but like, what is all this movie to you in sum total?
Well, I just love it as the specificity. I mean, it feels like it's made for people like us, obviously, and cinephiles. And the movie's taken on a cult following. I mean, when I showed this movie to my friends in college, they thought it was really funny. They loved it because just the individual stuff is funny, but also they get what it's going for. I think that it's way too much to explain to someone. It should just be funny, though, I think, to somebody. Yeah. But it just, it didn't make hardly any money at all. I mean, it was made for $5 million.
What do you think, too, that it was like
it made a tenth of its budget.
Partially ahead of its time in terms of the humor of Robot Chicken or Family Guy or like things that specialize, it's in not only this movie, but like Kentucky Fried Movie and some of these eras of these televisual anthology films, like the influence that had on later creators might make this more palatable to audiences today than it would have been in the 80s.
Yes.
Because I've never seen this movie in a theater, and it would feel weird to see this movie in a theater. To me, this movie's almost meant to be seen on a television screen, because that's obviously how it how it operates. And I'll never forget when I first ever had any knowledge of this movie. I remember I was literally channel surfing.
Yeah.
And literally saw this and was like, what is this? And stopped on it. And then like it simulated someone changing the channel. And that was kind of a weirdly important moment for me. I was like, oh wait, what is this? And realized what it was doing. And so again, it would be weird to see this movie on a theater screen because it's so wrapped up in the culture of television that it would be weird to see it that way.
Yeah.
And one of the movies I can't quite imagine seeing that way on the theater screen because, again, that's just how I was introduced to it, and that's how I've seen it.
Yeah.
So,
this is really funny, I think. And
and like I said, I want to go back to something I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
I do, like I said, there is a certain generation of this director, Joe Dante, John Landis, John Carpenter, who again has nothing to do with this, that I feel like there's a certain anxiety among some of these guys that, again, as I said, they were not Spielberg and they were not Lucas because they came from a same time and place that they did.
Yeah.
But didn't crack through totally. Now, I think Dante's has, out of the people involved in this, kind of the best outside career in terms of having his own like universe of success.
Right.
Landis has been one that's obviously yoked in outside scandal and controversy with what happened with Twilight Zone. But obviously, this kind of digging through the refuse of, quote, trash culture, close quote, is something that happened over the course of the 80s after the success of Star Wars or Jaws, and like them taking these not trash culture items, but certainly things that were considered on a B level and legitimizing them and these, grand successes. I do feel like this movie is, in a very, very discreet way, an attempt by some of these artists to say, well, I love that stuff too, and look at what I can do. There is a little bit of an element with that with this movie.
Yeah, there's a desperation,
But again, I do think this movie overall is pretty funny. Again, it's a fun movie that most people have probably not heard of to show.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just very good. And again, it lacks the backbone that something like Hollywood Shuffle has, not only narratively but also just thematically.
Yeah.
If you're just comparing these two movies together, but it is still really fun and a good time. I feel like. So, anything else?
No, I mean, I think that's about it. I know we
watched this on a newer Kino Blu-ray, by the way.
I know we talked about it a lot in the context of the specific, sketches, but I feel like that's, the way to talk about it in its own way, because moment to moment, that's when it's funniest, I think.
Yeah. So that about does it for this episode of Overlapping Dialogue. But before we go, we've got a preview next episode. Jeff Probst, what have we got coming up?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
I'd buy that for $1.
Will there be anything else, sir?
Yeah, I emptied the register and put the money in the bag.
Excuse me?
So give me your money and all of it, and don't fuck with me! Now move! Open the safe, Pops. Open the goddamn safe!
We don't have a safe.
Shit! Close your goddamn safe! You son of a bitch! No, I'll count to 3, and you better open that son of a bitch. Come on, come on! I'm gonna blow her brains out.
I'll open the safe.
Good boy. Come on. Well, you better open that and count to 3. 1, 2. Drop the gun. You are under arrest. Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
son enemigos del delito, orden, honor y el servicio. Pon atención, hay que buscar por el portal tu libertad. Ay, patrullero, haz lo que quiero, patrullero. Sale con buenas intenciones, no lo dejaron los cabrones. Pon atención, para vivir hay que doler en el deber. Ay, patrullero, haz lo que quiero, patrullero. Ay, patrullero, haz lo que quiero, patrullero. En el desierto una noche pasaron gringos en un coche. Hay que vivir degradación con la verdad. Hay salvación. Ay, patrullero. Ay, patrullero. Ay, patrullero.
So I forgot to mention, the second clip you heard was actually a piece of score
from the movie
in question, because we literally cannot find on YouTube an easy.
And we
scene
haven't
to
watched
throw
the
in there.
movie yet, so
Yeah.
we don't know what to look for.
So of course, those two movies, a very cop-centric episode.
Of course, we know what the second one is.
Yeah.
It's like, but,
First one, of course, is RoboCop from 1987 and Highway Patrolman from 1991. Two cop-centric movies.
In different ways.
Let's start with RoboCop.
Yeah.
This was the very first R-rated movie I ever saw, I remember.
This is randomly the first R-rated movie that my friend Ryan ever saw, too. So I think that's so random to me. That,
I think for a particular generations of younger people, like we saw, well, I've not even really seen, there was like a RoboCop animated series. I don't know if you know about that. That was like popular in the 90s. There were toys in the 90s. That's how I first I remember that.
Like, we had that one toy.
Yeah, but our grandma, and I'm sure this is true of a lot of generations of kids, would always like hand us the like Sears and then also J.C. Penney's like Christmas catalogs, and those always felt like these treasure chest of wonders. And she said, "All right, you can pick anything you want to out of here," and like go through, and it felt like this.
I'd love to buy a bulk of those and look through them again, because we used to have a bunch, but
it felt like this biblical document. And one of them was, I remember one year that like RoboCop like toy. And I was like, and that just looked cool. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, that looks cool. Like a RoboCop, yeah. And then I remember begging my parents like to rent. It was on VHS at the time, back in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. I can't quite remember when it was. Asked them, hey, could I see this? And they were like, thought a lot about it. And they were like, okay, fine. My dad watched it with me. One of the most insane things I remember ever seeing.
Yeah.
At that moment in my life, it just felt like, wow. Like,
well, there are versions of it.
Violent.
There are versions of it that are unrated still, I think. I mean, what I can say about that, were you...
No,
I didn't want to interrupt, sorry.
Go on.
Because, I think that's a very instructive story, because this is a random place to start, but I had this conversation this week with some people I won't name because nobody would know them anyway, but about rated R movie, or movies that are rated R, and I was talking to these people, and they were like, yeah, just movies now that are rated R, they're just so rated R, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they are in certain ways, but I was just thinking, watching this clip again, that there was a time when rated R movies were like rated R movie. Now it feels like movies don't push buttons anymore. You know, I'm not saying that movies can't be violent or can't have things that are bad in them, but I don't know, it seems like to me there was that era of 80s action movie going into the 90s, or just the Paul Verhoeven product in general was just like really transgressive in a popular way of just
in terms of sexuality, in terms of violence, in terms of language.
Especially, RoboCop as a movie. I remember seeing it a couple years ago when I was in college. Because I saw the Terminator movies when I was a kid, and those were something.
And let me say, by the way, like I've not seen any of the RoboCop sequels, and the Terminator movies I eventually also saw not too long after that, and I fell in love with those first two, especially. So we've seen those tons, obviously.
But that's all I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like people say stuff like that now, but it's like, no, actually, it was always worse. It felt like when the R rating truly, after PG-13, it feels like the R rating really took on another level.
Well, we've talked about on this podcast before about the watering down of the PG-13 rating, and that probably has something to do with people's perceptions of what is in.
And so that's all just to say that you watch a movie like this and you're like, wow, this really is still that, you know. I mean, because I think a lot about, because it's not only the violence, it's the way you shoot it too. And Paul Verhoeven is just a master in that way. He's not necessarily one of my favorite directors in quotes, but I've always been so impressed by his ability to, you know, shoot movies in that way
and
to
make them
it
feel lurid.
Yes, to make it feel really lurid. Total Recall is another one of the most like violent and disgusting kind of movies in its own way.
It's kind of mainstream.
It's very mainstream. It's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but RoboCop especially, I think it has that reputation, but it still very much is that. I mean, when I watched it, like I said, I was older. I'd seen a lot of movies like that by then, and I was blown away by it in that way of like, wow, this really is like something. Because I think about his death scene in the movie where he just gets blasted with it, and it doesn't feel like it goes on too long, and then that way it's unrealistic, but it doesn't feel like, it's like even in some ways worse than the Sonny Corleone death, which is bad, but it has this opera to it that's very strange. Like, that's just very grimy, like the way it's shot. There's some shots that feel voyeuristic of the way that it's shooting him's death, like that just feels very lurid. Like I said, part of that comes from television in its own way too, about news reports and like the way that violence was filmed for TV in its own way is it. But I mean, it feels very cinematic, but like it's kind of a meeting of those two dispositions in a very strange way.
And also like that moment of him being nearly murdered and killed, it almost acts as propaganda for us to root for him no matter what throughout the rest of the movie, because obviously the people he's dealing with are clearly evil, awful people that do not need to be in the world. But then it feeds into the like fascistic satire that the movie's ultimately all about, in terms of, is this what the future of police work is, where we dehumanize police work even further and just turn machines? Because the whole thing is, you remember, you know, in the movie that there's that whole corporation that's wanting to create even more mechanized.
Yeah, it's like basically a Terminator, like, and I mean like
warfare.
Terminator, like at the beginning of the Terminator movies with those big like walker machine things that don't even look like and something I noticed in that scene, it's like, he helps out the old people, but he kind of halfway destroys the place, and then just says, "Thank you for your cooperation," and leaves. And it's very like he don't even really care about the people.
It's just about murdering,
he
killing,
has to stop
out.
He just has to stop the violence, which not really caring about how or why he does that. And that, I think, is what is like I said, the point of the movie. And as the movie goes on, he becomes more of himself again by the end, in my memory. But that's, I think, the prevailing memory of that movie is just the personlessness of policing, and kind of as in that sense and in a literal sense. And so, yeah, it's a movie that I liked when I first saw it, but I've thought a lot about since then, and I think actually is a really
I've only
pretty
seen
powerful
it
movie.
twice. I'm going to see it 3 times, obviously, for this. And I remember seeing it as a kid, seeing it some years later and being like, I don't know if I'm going to like this, and actually still liking it.
Yeah.
And I probably will like it even more now, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
We've talked about Verhoeven already a little bit with Basic Instinct.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's a little bit of a different movie for him, but nonetheless, it's still within his large box of interests.
Right.
We've neither one of us have seen Highway Patrolman, which again came out in 1991, but we're pretty big fans of Alex Cox in general. This has been one of the movies that we've been wanting to see for him for a while. Levi, for you, when you hear the cinema of Alex Cox, what comes to mind for you?
Well, of course, it should be said he wrote, probably the biggest thing that he did was write Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which he was close to making in and of itself at different points. That movie had, and we talked about it at the time because we talked about him then. That is a very Alex Cox kind of movie in its own way, even though it's a Terry Gilliam film, and but that with that movie or with his cinema in general, it's this very wild, crazy, partially like Scorsese, partially like Stone. I mean, all those people surrounding the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas,
universe.
Yeah. Jay Cox as well in that way.
Yeah.
But that with his films, it's this very, punk aesthetic, which I'm a fan of punk music in its own way, and so to see that in cinema, I think is very interesting. But Repo Man, especially, is a just totally crazy movie. If you've never seen that, we're going to try to rewatch it before we even do this. But is obviously very, very great. You can tell a story about that next week about the college thing.
Yeah,
with that.
right.
But that also Sid and Nancy, which I think is his most serious film about Sid Vicious.
I think
Nancy
his most
Spurgeon.
well-made movie.
Yeah.
But that was also an early Roger Deakins
Yeah.
film too, so it just looks incredible.
And that
for
movie is
time
a little
period.
more serious than his others are, but it does have that one great moment of what about the farewell drugs? That she says at one point. That movie has one of the greatest openings of any movie ever, too.
Yeah.
I think is just so great, and the whole movie's great, but that's just wow, this is just awesome. And then Walker, which is
crazy.
Wow,
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start with that movie. Is about William Walker, the kind of adventurer, explorer who kind of took over Nicaragua in the 1800s, and is ultimately a really big political document about Reagan American foreign policy, especially in Nicaragua at the time.
So it kind of for most of it, you think it's set in the 19th century, but then all of a sudden there's
helicopters
and things that link it to the modern day of the 80s.
And then Straight to Hell, which we've also seen, which is a very questionable movie.
Yeah, that's a
lot
little
of
more
ways.
disposable, but it does have a Jim Jarmusch cameo in it, so you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and it has a lot of his people who are in his movies in general, Alex Cox, and it's just a spaghetti western, but then about people who are literally addicted to caffeine and coffee. It's I don't know. So very Pinchonian.
So again, we've not seen Highway Patrolman, but that's been one of those big Cox movies that we've been wanting to see.
And so, we should say his career took a major downturn with Walker and Straight to Hell.
Both kind of flops,
right? Because Repo Man was kind of a midnight movie hit. Sid and Nancy was kind of a sort of respectable movie he made, and then made Walker, and everybody's like, literally, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And lost a lot of money and was not a success. And then Straight to Hell, I think he kind of just made. But then Highway Patrolman he made in Mexico, so it's all in Spanish, which he speaks Spanish. And
he's British, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
But interestingly, he's kind of gone in the professorial route and is kind of a film professor. I'd love to take one of his classes because that would just be crazy. He had a really great appearance on the Movies That Made Me with Joe Dante and Josh Olson, and they were talking to him about some of his favorite movies and kind of things they talked about were very interesting. And we love Alex Cox, and think he's great. So I'm really excited to see this movie in particular because I haven't ever seen it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most exciting things for us is though we don't exactly totally know what it's about
or what
plot-wise.
the tone is either.
Yeah.
Because I've watched the trailer, I've seen kind of things about it, and it seems like it's one of his more serious movies, but also seems like it's totally wild and gonzo and crazy. So I'm not really sure what to expect, which is kind of what I love about him, that he's able to do that. So, you know. Does it say anything about what his influences are?
Cited Louis Buñuel and Akira Kurosawa, as well as Western film director Sergio Leone, Sergio Corbucci, Sam Peckinpah, John Ford, and Julio Casti. I'm not sure how you say that.
Yeah, there's another. Yeah.
Also a fan of Godzilla films.
Yeah. So he seems like he's very all over the place as far as that. And I know he was, like I said, a big fan of and part of kind of the punk scene, which meant something probably different to him in a British sense than it did to others. But
I love his personal life. Says, as of 2011, Cox resided in Colestein, Oregon, United States with his wife, writer Tudalina Babish Davies. But it's like,
yeah, we don't know.
Well, the last 13 years, we're not sure what happened. So that about does it.
So yeah, what'll be cool about that is just trying to see what do we make sense of these different policing things.
Yeah, we don't know to what extent they're going to connect or not, but I'm sure they'll connect in their own way.
Yeah.
This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.
So nice. Goodbye.